Hello and welcome to Sex Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku already knew his future? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
UA University. Admission, after a month. The day of the entrance exam. It truly is surreal. Looking up at the renowned hero school, Izuku thought, being here after all this time. I've been in this world for 15 years, and this is the only place I've ever thought of. All he could hope for was that it wouldn't be one of the cheesy UA. A little intimidated by the size of the school, Himiko confessed, this is so much bigger than what I thought it would be. She wore her glasses, had her hair tied up, and was professionally dressed. Izuku wore more relaxed attire because they would be wearing tracksuits for their exams. In a knowing tone, Izuku said, having second thoughts? No way. I just don't want to get lost here. You know how bad I am with directions. Himiko laughed. Yet you can find me almost instantly no matter where I am. It's true. She always managed to track him down, wherever he might be in Japan. Regardless. Himiko proudly exclaimed. A girl like me always remembers her favorite restaurant. As she received a sardonic glance. As she began to leave, her head still turned to him. It only made her laugh. But aren't you a little nervous? Shrugging, Izuku said, just a bit. Despite his uncertainty about whether the entrance exam would be the same, he felt prepared. But we won't find out standing here. No duh. Let's get moving before. Eep. Himiko scrambled as she tried to backtrack and ended up at the ground. She was confused because she thought Izuku would catch her at the last second, but instead she found herself suspended in midair. Eh? A bright, upbeat voice asked, Are you all right? Himiko looked up and was forced to freeze. Meanwhile, Izuku couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at his sister's savior. Uraraka Ochako enters. Uraraka helped Himiko stand up and explained, I stopped you with my quirk. The blonde was unusually silent, but Uraraka didn't hear a word. I'm sorry I didn't ask first, but I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you. Himiko said almost robotically, Nope, not at all. It was almost like she was doing a mental reboot. Uraraka smiled and turned away, asking, Isn't this all way nerve-wracking? I have to get going. I hope your exams go well. You too. Izuku exclaimed, dismissing her. When she was out of sight, he turned to face his sister, who was staring in Uraraka's back direction. Like a cat spotting its prey, her eyes dart. So, got any nerves now or? Himiko lunged at him and bit his arm before he could finish. For the passing examinees, it was quite the sight, and they wondered if being insane was a requirement of their UA exams. Classroom, UA University. Later, at the moment, Izuku and everyone else in the room were wearing tracksuits. Due to their respective exams, he and Himiko had to part ways. He had to acknowledge that his prior study had helped him feel less anxious during the written exam. As confident as ever, Katsuki sat next to him. Kyoka sat across from him, and Raiko sat next to her. All of them were wearing the same tracksuits. Izuku turned to their friends and said, Everyone had it easy, right? The Katsuki sneered, No shit. I fucking destroyed that exam. Ignoring the glare directed at her, Kyoka remarked, He did. I heard his growling from the other room. Me on the other hand, that was beyond stressful. Especially when I heard how some of the others here tried cheating. Although Katsuki rolled his eyes, he didn't seem to care. Seriously? Fucking morons. Raiko sighed, somewhat relieved, it wasn't that bad. Glad we took the time to actually study for it though. Izuku, still in disbelief at the abrupt change of heart, remarked, I'm still kind of surprised to see you here to be honest. Even though they never received a satisfactory explanation for his decision to change, it had been a welcome change. But what was his sister's opinion of it? Judging from some of the faces he made when joining them, it was pretty obvious that he and Rumi didn't get along. Raiko waved away nonchalantly, What can I say? I'm just full of surprises. He still appeared to be feeling strange simply by being here, even with the changes. Think we'll get done with this soon? I still like some free time for myself when I can get it. Kyoka perked up as Izuku turned to face the opening door and said, Just waiting for the teacher, speaking of. Kyoka put her jacks away and slowly covered her ears, asking, Isn't that? Yup. Present Mike, also known as Hizashi Yamada, entered, always present in his hero costume. The man, a teacher at UA, was undoubtedly one of the higher-ranking heroes, and well known for his radio show. Mike always responded when he could and was always forthright when people called to hear the other side of heroics. Mike yelled, UA candidates, are you excited for your exam? in an attempt to get the class excited. Raiko said, rather dually, with a half-spirited fist bump, woo-hoo. The other candidates had actually snickered at this, and Mike felt a little less confident. A single glare was also directed at him, but it was missed. Mike immediately perked up as though nothing had happened. Keeping it mellow? I getcha, he said. I gotta keep this brief due to how many of you are here today. Think this is our biggest roster yet? Oh, the game of pressure. That would do for him. As everyone glanced down at their previously received cards, Mike clarified, anyway, as the application mentioned, you're all rockin' to participate in a 10-minute mock battle within a simulated suburban city. After I finish up things here, you'll be taken to your designated battle center. Before a savage smile appeared, Katsuki muttered, huh, so they don't want people teaming up in order to get through the exam easier. Shame, I would have loved to get the same on field as one of you. Then I could crush you in front of those teachers. Unable to comprehend how much was being invested in a hero school, Raiko asked out loud, seriously, what is the budget of this place? Izuku muttered, I think the answer to that is yes. Mike pulled out a remote control as a screen with the standard robots appeared behind him. Aight. Listen up folks. We have 3 types of mock villains for you to beat. You'll earn types based on the difficulty, so choose wisely when out there, Mike said. But when he pressed it once more machines with human-like features appeared. But be careful. As heroes in training you need to make sure you don't hurt civilians either. Introducing our mock civilian. Make sure to not mistake them for the villains, okay? Izuku kept thinking about how well thought out the disguise was. In the beginning, rescue points only mattered when saving another student and weren't intended to be widely known. Nevertheless, it was simpler to obtain them after these civilian bots were added. It also demonstrated just how careless some students could be, which is likely to lead to failure. Clever. At that moment, an authoritative voice said, excuse me, sir, I have a question. Iida Tenya is shown here. Go ahead, listener. On the printout, you listed exactly 4 villains, never mind these civilian bots were not mentioned in the slightest. With all due respect, if this is an error on UA's part then it is inexcusable. As students aiming for Japan's top hero school, we expect nothing but the best. A mistake like this is disgraceful, Iida said, repeatedly chopping his arm. Then he turned abruptly and fixed his gaze on their group. And you? You and your group have been distracting this whole time. If you're here to treat this as a joke, then you should leave now. To Katsuki's surprise, Raiko was the first to speak. Us? If we were in trouble we would know about it. You want to know what's actually distracting, along with annoying? Standing up in the middle of a teacher's explanation, demanding answers that he was going to give anyway. I merely wanted clarification before, Raiko continued, clearly annoyed, he was going to explain it. Now quit wasting time. Unable to respond, Iida sat down again in silence. Now, settle down. Listeners, now to answer that question with the civil bots, this is to be treated like an actual part of the city. Villains and civilians are out there after all. As for the other question. Mike suddenly cracked a sarcastic grin. To put it simply, ya know how in games where you got your normal standard enemies. Well, our special 4th bot would be considered a trap. If you fight it, you lose all your points. Isn't that exciting? While Izuku was enjoying the fear tactic, nobody spoke. Yes, there was no justification for resisting it. Not everyone could take on that head-on because it was a huge, fucking robot, but that wasn't the purpose. Now that these civil bots had been added, the message was crystal clear. He didn't have to say any of that, though. Mock Battle Zone A, University of Arizona. For the purpose of their test, his friends were kept apart from him, each in their own zone. Of course, none of them worried Izuku. They believed that they would pass this test and be admitted to the university. He may have been overconfident, but he was certain they would succeed. Uraraka was shifting uneasily in place when he noticed her. He decided to encourage her and proceeded to poke her shoulder gently. She turned around with her fist ready and jumped, but she stopped. Uraraka exclaimed, "Oh, hi again," as she lowered her fist, her face beaming. "You're that guy with the blonde girl with the cute glasses." Later on, he was telling Himiko that, that was my little sister, Himiko Midoriya. I'm Izuku Midoriya." Uraraka grinned broadly before growing a little anxious. "Uraraka Ochako, it's so nice to meet you," she said. "Sorry for almost hitting you by the way." The brunette laughed loudly as Izuku joked, "Don't apologize, it's good reflexes alone for being a hero. Even more so when you stopped yourself before you clocked my face in." Naturally, he felt a hand on his shoulder after that. "You're right, Iida." Iida glared at the two and said, Can you be quiet? There are people trying to focus. Uraraka shifted uneasily and said, oh, sorry, but Izuku. Izuku made Iida stutter a little when he said, and yet, you're the one yelling. Now calm down. People have their own ways to relax, or do you not hear everyone else have their own conversations? Iida became a little less confident. That appears to be the case. It was sufficient to cause Izuku to sigh and reconsider his strategy. He entered this school without the need for any adversaries. Izuku held his head up to the boy and said, you know what, maybe we got off at the wrong foot. I'm Izuku Midoriya and this is Uraraka Ochako. We're trying to become heroes. Iida returned to life, shaking his hand and saying, oh, I am Iida Tenya. I too am aiming to become a hero. It's nice to meet you. Uraraka eagerly added. They were chatting and being amiable, which was good. That's how he had to keep it. So, are you guys nervous as well or? Iida declared with pride, only slightly, but I am confident in my ability as I am now. Izuku attracted their attention by saying, same here, helps to have a plan in mind. Plan? It was a straightforward strategy, but it worked. Sure. Take to the corners of the city, away from the other competitors, and take out as many villains as I can. In an exam like this, everyone is going to be grabbing as many points as they can right from the start. Being near all that chaos isn't going to do me any good. Besides, I bet the bots with the most points are going to be in the back, rather than the front. Having not considered that, Iida acknowledged, that's quite thoughtful of you. I could actually get there fastest and save myself some time. Uraraka said, that's a great idea. Mind if I use it? It didn't really matter to him. The more, the merrier. He and the others had every intention of failing this test. The doors abruptly opened, forcing him to get ready before there was any more time for conversation. Welp, time to go. Wait, complete cowling. 1% he boosted right out of there as soon as he got the chance. Leaping over anyone who stood in his way, he bounced off the ground quickly and pushed his way up a small building. He ran faster and leapt off again, disappearing between buildings this time. The heck are you all waiting for? There's no countdown in a real-life situation? Get going. Naturally, they all went into a panic and hurried to win. Izuku has already seen multiple mock villains threatening to smash into a storefront in the meantime. He lunged down, his fist reeled back, and all he could do was smirk. They had little chance and were destroyed. Mock Battle Zone B, University of Arizona. Katsuki was laughing uncontrollably. He easily blasted himself into the closest group of mock villains as soon as the exam began, separating himself from the extras taking it. The enjoyment of blasting apart random trash and blasting apart robots differed significantly. He had always wanted to blow up a bunch of robots, and now he was actually doing it, in order to become a hero, that is. Die, 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 all right, he was having a great time. It was fortunate for him that he didn't even see the other competitors. Ultimately, he didn't want anyone to interfere with his enjoyment of this place. Furthermore, he had a straightforward plan. Blast himself around the area and take down any machines that stood in his way. Clearly, it was the greatest foo when Katsuki heard the voice. He grunted, help, oh dear, oh dear. He saw the civil bots fleeing from a group of one-pointers as he turned around from his ruined pile. He blew the mock villains apart and blasted himself past the screaming bot without saying much more. He laughed and was about to blast himself away when the civil bot grabbed him. Oh, thank you, kind sir. What is your name? Son of Katsuki. Katsuki Bakugo. Future #1 hero. He desperately wanted to win, and he had no time for this. With a deadpan expression, the civil bot declared, Katsuki Bakugo. I shall save it within my eternal data systems so I may never forgive it. Now go on. Future #1 hero. Save the day and all that. Unable to contain his broad smile, Katsuki blasted himself away, saying, TCH. Always. All the while, the civil bot waved him away. I cannot wait to tell my family about this momentous encounter. Mock Battle Zone U, University of Arizona. Death to all heroes. Death to all heroes. Death to all biz. Kyoka stood over it as it abruptly went limp, its body exploding out. Its body pulled away from her jacks. Kyoka had to acknowledge that she was doing better than she had anticipated, saying, another one bites the dust. It was easy enough to sneak around these guys. The fact that they weren't particularly strong also helped. It only got better for her when she entered their bodies and sent vibrations through them. But it was also a little challenging. She could hear most of it, including explosions, shouting, buildings collapsing, and oddly enough, some gunshots. However, Living on the streets while growing up in a society like this makes you kind of accustomed to it. It didn't help, though, that she knew she would require an aspirin once everything was finished. Hero life and all that, oh well, in relation to. After spotting her, several one-pointers were on their way to her. With her jacks poised to strike, she stepped back. She then decided to remove a lengthy scrap from the wreckage after spotting it from one of the robots. Fortunately, it was light for her long enough, and finished with a heavy piece. She sprang down at one of them and collapsed its dome without saying another word. The scrap struck over the heads of the other two as well, despite their attempts to attack. Kyoka muttered, recalling one of Izuku's suggestions for a support item. Neat. When she saw a few more approaching, she had to raise the new weapon while her jacks were ready. You wanna rock? Then come at me. They did, and as she was about to grab them, a girl walked straight by her. She pressed her fingers together and continued before she could even consider stopping her. When the villain's bots tried to attack, she moved out of their way and merely tapped them. Before the girl had simply stepped on them carelessly, Kyoka had heard them screaming down to the size of toys. Kyoka said, still in awe of the display, thanks. The girl gave her a thumbs up, hummed, and turned back to face her before leaving. For a brief moment, Kyoka was left wondering what had happened. Mock Battle Zone X, University of Arizona. What the fuck is the budget here? Raiko stomped down another robot with a furious foot. Robots I can understand, but what is with the amount of mock cities around here? How much, really, did UA make money by doing such things? Not to mention for an exam. What was the cost of the actual classes here? What about items of support? With those kinds of businesses, what kinds of agreements did that have? Outfits? The thought of it was actually absurd. How much could have been used for something more worthwhile, really? For heaven's sake, they were still driving gas-powered vehicles. The thought of it made him feel embarrassed and annoyed, and he was powerless to stop it. He held up a single kitchen knife and couldn't help but scoff when he saw several more robots approaching. This was the closest thing he had considered, and they were permitted to bring specific items into the exam. He watched as they drew closer and closer before he tossed it, holding it up to his face and tapping the ground lightly. As he kicked another bot away, he teleported directly to the villain bot, who was pierced clean in its glass visor. His hand was on the handle. Another had attempted to surprise him, but he had just kicked beneath its feet and moved around it. He stabbed into its head and instantly raised it back up, preventing it from even touching the ground. Raiko couldn't help but mutter, feels like this is too easy. His thoughts were interrupted by a scream. Why did I say anything? Help me. I'm trapped. The robotic voice said, and Raiko's ears perked up. Out of pure curiosity, he followed and ended up in an alleyway. He discovered a civil bot stuck inside what appeared to be a wrecked car. Please, assist me. Raiko walked over without saying anything and discovered that the car door had collapsed. Oh right. He only tore it off enough with his strength to allow the machine to crawl out. Then, with an even smaller version of it in its arms, it had reached back inside. Oh my god. After accepting the smaller bot, the civil bot said, thank you, sir. We won't ever forget this, and walked away. Raiko muttered, strangely warm, anytime. Strangely content and strangely relieved. But he remembered where he was and shook his head. He swiftly pivoted to find additional villains to defeat. He was more worried about the rumbling footsteps than he was about the emotional harm he had just suffered. Mock Battle Zone A, University of Arizona. Currently, several of them were trapped inside a building entrance that was blocked off. They had little time to think as they scrambled to find a way out. Fortunately, they didn't have to because Izuku Midoriya's form appeared and the debris was moved out of the way. Don't be afraid. You're safe now. They didn't require 2 reminders. The civil bot thanked him and a few others who were having trouble getting out. Oh, thank you again, young man, he said. Izuku simply nodded before stepping away from the structure and continuing to pace the area. He had long since forgotten how much time had gone by, but he was certain that he had earned enough points to not only pass but also rank highly. But soon enough, the real test would start. He couldn't help but smile ferociously when he heard the cries of panic that followed the heavy footsteps. Izuku appeared to bolt from his position, leaving a trail of lightning in his wake. All right, then. Let's see who needs saving. He was leaping as fast as he could from building to building. Anyone who wasn't trained to see these things couldn't have kept up with him, even though he wasn't nearly as fast as someone like Iida or even All Might at this point. He paused at the structure and peered at the 0-pointer. It was ridiculously big, strutting around as if it owned the place and sending the other candidates into a panic. He'd assume it was just the way Nezu liked it. He saw right away that the others were fleeing as fast as they could. Since they risked losing their own points and it was worth 0, he could see why they were. His impending disappointment stemmed from their disregard for the civil bots who were begging for assistance. Some of them were even stepping over them or pushing them aside. It's safe to say who failed, which must greatly aid in reducing the numbers. But he was reminded that there were still good ones when he saw Uraraka attempting to guide a few of them out of the zero-pointer. When he saw the zero-pointer crash into a building close to her, he stopped thinking, oh right, isn't this where she... Unknowingly, fragments of the building were falling in her direction as Izuku's eyes glowed emerald. Not now. Whole cowling. After hearing the rumbling, Uraraka eventually noticed the debris approaching her. Knowing it was too late, she had attempted to protect herself, but a green form had unexpectedly materialized in the middle. Before it could strike her, Izuku had swung his leg around and kicked the falling debris into dust in a single motion. Take a picture. Uraraka exclaimed. Whoa, as Izuku and the civil bots touched down beside her. You came out of nowhere. As the civil bots applauded, Izuku grinned and said, I do that sometimes. But they turned back when they heard the rumbling and saw that the zero-pointer was still approaching. Furthermore, the other villain bots were moving quickly in their direction. Get them to safety. I'll take care of this. Right. Concurred Uraraka. After witnessing that kick, she had no reason to argue with him. He rushed forward, laying out the machines with strikes and devastating axe kicks, proving her correct. Wow, so awesome. Uraraka-san. She exclaimed as she turned around and saw Iida approaching her. We should head out, that is the zero-pointer. Iida blinked and said, no kidding, but we gotta make sure these guys are safe, as the civil bots approached them. But he straightened up in a flash and cut his hand. Iida yelled commands as if they were instinctive. Right. This way everyone, evacuate the area in a clean and formal manner. He had done so with Uraraka's assistance, guiding the civil bots farther away from the zero-pointer. Izuku, meanwhile, was exerting every effort he could. While protecting the other civil bots and other potential students, he was quickly eliminating the other mock villains. He was able to move between buildings with ease thanks to the shoot style, and One for All was operating flawlessly. The best part was that he had not yet been made to engage in combat with the zero-pointer. St. Louis Smash. He had sent a shockwave through the robot with his axe kick. Good timing, he said, sending any of the other villain machines nearby flying. This shouldn't go on for very long. A building collapsed, followed by some yelling, interrupting his own thoughts. When he saw that some people had been caught in the devastation and were scurrying on the ground as debris fell in their direction, his eyes widened. Izuku sped in their direction, kicking it to 2%, obliterating any falling debris before it could reach them. Izuku couldn't wait to see them leave, so he yelled, get going. The colors of the tracksuit nearer the zero-pointer caught his attention as he looked around for anyone else. Before it could get any closer, he hurried forward and seized whoever it was. It did, however, notice him and raise its hand to seize him. Izuku's passenger screamed in his arms as he leapt between its legs and hopped onto the building. Izuku was able to land on top of the zero-pointer as it swung its arm to attack. The process was slightly dented as he dashed to the head and leapt clean off of it while running at full speed. He landed on the ground and glared at the zero-pointer, which was a few blocks away. He turned away the person he had picked up and was confronted by. Nothing. Excuse me, he said. He blinked and saw that he was carrying the unbeatable body of Toru Hagakure, who was slightly changing. She winced a little when Izuku nodded and gently let her stand up. Can you put me down now? She asked. Thank you. I completely stepped the wrong way and hurt my ankle badly during that. I thought it was gonna flatten me. Don't worry, I doubt they would risk doing anything that major. However, given how destructive they were a little too casual. If the debris hit a student hard enough, they could have been killed by any of the buildings that collapsed. Oh, I'm Izuku Midoriya by the way. Toru Hagakure, thank you again for the save. Toru reiterated her gratitude, and Izuku smiled at her. However, it was cut short when the zero-pointer stomped. She reminded him of how animated she was. Gah! That thing is chasing us, she said, waving her arms frantically, but before she grabbed his arm, he was more preoccupied with the approaching giant robot and prepared to leave. Come on. That thing is definitely the zero-pointer. Izuku responded, feeling a surge of nervousness. Yeah, I know. After all, he had to acknowledge that he had been acting on adrenaline, and it was a giant fucking robot. Meanwhile, there was also a feeling of protection that had developed. But there's still too many people around to ignore it. But you'd lose your points, he said, forgetting that everyone had accepted that, though he couldn't hold them entirely responsible. You'd be crazy to do that. You might lose your chance of getting in here UA. That's the risk of being a hero, I guess. Izuku smiled slightly at her, but hey, I'll give it a chance to surrender. Sir, Izuku had already taken off before Toru could finish her sentence. He leapt between buildings and fled from the screen. He ended up standing across from the zero-pointer after landing on top of one. Izuku shouted, "Hey there, mind stopping all of this, to get its attention. You're causing too much destruction and hurting a lot of people. We can do all about this if you want." Naturally, the others left comments below. The heck is that idiot doing? It's a giant robot, not a person. Forget him. Let's book it out of here. Yes, that's pleasant. In fact, the zero-pointer appeared to pause for a second and gaze down at him. On the other hand, its red blurred eyes slowly rose up its arm. Feeling the full cowling spark all around him, Izuku said, "Oh well. No one can say that I haven't tried." He lifted one leg forward and put his hands in his pockets, saying, "If that's the case, how about something a little new? This may be a replica of the original, but any fighter knows that mastering impersonation is the first step in inheriting a style. Complete cowling. Leg style in black. The use of a second kicking style may cause confusion, but the solution was straightforward. Shoot style was designed for super moves, which primarily involved using his legs to fight. The black leg style, on the other hand, was designed for quick, forceful impact kicks that came quickly while being supported by acrobatic movement. It was not the first time that Sanji Vinsmoke's style was introduced to the world, and it would not be the last. Izuku said as the 0-point swung down at him, "Okay, let's cook." He left his position and sprang out of it more quickly than anyone could have predicted. He lunged for his target with his leg out. "I'll shoot." He swung around and landed his heel on the left shoulder of the enormous machine, bent it easily as sparks flew out. He leapt over and swung his leg around into its lower back, launching himself off it. Sell. The zero-pointer shook where it was, but it remained balanced. But when Izuku landed behind, that would soon change. He leapt out of his position instantly and aimed straight for the machine's thigh. Quiso. It appeared to finally lose its foot and drop to one knee, attempting to support itself with a building. It attempted to smash down with its free arm, but the kick had caused it to move much more slowly. With ease, Izuku sprinted past it, halted just beneath it, and then sprang upward. Muton shot. Quick kicks tore through the metal plating and went straight into the zero-pointer's chest. The zero-pointer was unable to escape the attack and had to remain motionless when it abruptly found itself flying backwards and losing its arm. Even though its visor was malfunctioning severely, it was still able to recognize that Izuku was above it. His foot pointed down. Here's a little add-on for the style, so get ready. Full cowling rushed around Izuku, and the zero-pointer could only defend itself by raising its remaining arm. With a broad smile, he dove down, giving his leg a little extra force for the maneuver. Dynamic entry. He easily destroyed it by piercing through its head and hand repeatedly. As the zero-pointer fell behind him, he briefly skidded off the ground before coming to a stop with one smoking leg up. He took his hands out of his pockets and lowered it slowly. Mike yelled, "Time's up. The entrance exam is over," and Izuku couldn't help but smile at the shocked expressions. He said, "Well, that was fun." Out loud. Nothing could have gone more smoothly than testing out one for all in the exam. There weren't many ways he could go all out without taking any chances. Uraraka yelled, "That was so cool," which startled many people. "He really did it." "Woo," Toru exclaimed, putting her arms up in the air. Izuku was totally caught off guard because even the civil bots were acting in the same way. He tried to conceal his smile by scratching his cheek and averting his gaze. Iida muttered in belief, "Incredible. To think he was capable of such a feat." But he also considered how the boy had probably lost points for confronting the zero-pointer. Did he not? Hold on, the judges ought to have noticed that, which implies. Observation room for the UA test, Powerloader exclaimed, "My machines," after realizing how badly his zero-pointers were being outperformed. All the people around him could do was stare awkwardly at the sobbing hero. One of the few who was able to ignore it was Nezu, who instead found himself giggling with delight. "Why are you laughing?" Nezu chuckled as he gazed at the screens and said, "Why? Because we have so many promising heroes this year. So many have the potential to be great heroes, yet only those who truly shine would be allowed to take that chance." Mike continued, grinning and dripping sweat, "No kidding. This roster is insane this year. Just hope they make it on their first day, eh, Eraser?" As direct and unimpressed as ever, Aizawa stated, "Only if they can get to the starting line." If not, then they'll waste my time. Mike jokingly said, Yesh. Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. However, he quickly turned away when Aizawa gave him a glare. Midnight grinned and said, boys, we still have a lot of work to get done. With his trademark smile on his face, All Might declared, Miss Midnight is correct. We have a long list to go over and plenty of students to pick from. Let's get to it in. Aizawa said, already squirming into his sleeping bag, shut it. All Might muttered, rude, in a normal voice that only Nezu could hear. These classes will differ significantly from those for our regular students. I sense it. Nezu laughed, unsure of the reason behind his feelings. Was it fear or was it just excitement? Well, he might discover it later. Living room, Midoriya household, 1 week later. After a week had gone by, everyone was waiting to see how UA would respond, and whether they would truly enter. Izuku, however, was not the type of person who might have been experiencing anxiety or fear. Even he had to admit that he was a little concerned about the possibility that he was mistaken, but it certainly helped to know how things went. However, that was minuscule. He was currently taking notes on his own training regimen while seated in the living room. Depending on the situation in the United Arab Emirates, he would have to make significant adjustments. Went down, in fact. Depending on how they treated them, they would either make him lessen it or improve it. However, he also wanted to consider his classmates' training, their support equipment, their amazing moves, and... Izuku jumped up from his position and exclaimed, Izu, Himi, as Himiko emerged from the kitchen. Inko entered through the door and lay on the floor, sprawled out. She was displaying 2 letters with the UA on them. Symbols. It's UA. Eee. Himiko snatched them up as she ran out of the kitchen. As Izuku grabbed his as it dropped from her grasp, she leapt onto the couch and gazed at hers. As Inko joined them eagerly, Izuku grinned and said, ladies first. Himiko was only able to nod before carefully unfolding the letter. They were shocked to see Nezu revealed by a holographic device. They actually have the money for this. Greeting Himiko, Midoriya. I am the dean of the university, Nezu. Allow me to say that I am quite fond of how you handled your essay and your assignment. Lawyers here are rare, even rarer are those who actually have the right mindset to do good. With that, I am proud to say that you have passed and have earned your place within UA. I cannot wait to see you here, Miss Midoriya. Then the messages stopped. With her arms raised in the air, Himiko exclaimed, Yippee, before glomping on Izuku and Inko. For a few more seconds, they could only laugh as they gave Himiko another hug before she abruptly released herself. We're going to UA together. Izuku laughed while holding the letter and said, I haven't even opened my letter yet. They'd be stupid to not pick you. You're one of the best people I know. If they didn't, then I'm taking myself to the next school that will take you, Himiko said with a scowl. It was so cute that she was totally dependent on him for helping her. But Izuku made Himiko jump a little when he said, don't put all your focus on staying with me, Himiko. You have your own life to live. UA is gonna look great on your resume in the future, and I can't think of anyone more thoughtful that deserves that opportunity. But Izuku put a hand on her shoulder and remarked, but nothing. Even if we attend different schools, you'll always be my little sister. The same one that I'll happily rush to if she needs me, you understand? Himiko muttered, probably unwilling to agree, I do. He still made a valid point, though. But at least look at it first. With a note of concern in her voice, Inko continued, I would like to know as well you know. She was aware that he had to struggle to gain points in order to pass the exam. She was even alarmed by the thought of only having to deal with robots, but Izuku reassured her and returned unscathed. Izuku was only able to nod. He inhaled deeply, then unfolded the letter to reveal his own miniature hologram. But he had been given All Might instead of Nezu. I am here. And louder than ever. Ha ha ha. I bet you didn't expect me to tell you your results. Well, I am to teach the newest heroes of this generation, so I'll be taking a bit of a backseat when it comes to my hero work. But have no fear. For whenever dangers arise, I will be what do you mean I'm taking too long? While Inko shushed them, Izuku and Himiko remarked, he's such a dork. All Might coughed into his hand and then straightened up, saying, how many more? Geez, I better get a move on. Now then, Izuku Midoriya. For your written exam, you passed with flying colors. Now onto the villain points. And the 0-pointer. Facing it causes the automatic loss of all points. It was Izuku who held Himiko down as he slowly stood up and said, I'm getting my rusty knife. Wait. Is what I would have said if it wasn't a ruse. There it is. That's right. It was a trick. Choosing to push away heroes who fight against any villain is not our way. All Might chuckled, oblivious to the sardonic looks he got. In reality, Izuku Midoriya, you exceeded expectations. In addition to fighting and earning an amazing number of villain points, you were also able to spot our deceit regarding our civil bots, treating them not as a machine to be ignored, but as real civilians, which has given you access to our secret rescue points. If we only concentrated on fighting, what sort of hero would we be? Bad ones. Himiko returned the request. But you did something in your fight with the zero-pointer that we didn't even think was related to it. Izuku stood in front of the zero-pointer and spoke, while Inko gasped at its size and All Might reappeared. You demonstrated a great deal of heroism, reminding many of my colleagues that it takes more than throwing a mighty fist, the screen said. Why, during your exam, you even motivated others by helping those around you. Izuku couldn't help but smile at them when the screen changed to show characters like Iida and Uraraka moving around to assist the civil bots. Toru was also visible helping them, despite her injury. You will receive a significant number of points for it. Speaking of, your exam score was 250 points, 100 hero points, 100 rescue points, and 100 villain points. Fantastic. All Might laughed while Izuku wondered if there was a cap. He and Katsuki had dwelled on how many points they had gotten like the battle maniacs they were, and that didn't seem all too close to what they had gotten. With that in mind, I welcome you to UAA Welcoming University. Your Hero Academia is right here. Hey, he did say it. How can I shut this off once more? After that, the hologram came to an end. The house was silent until Himiko yelled and gave Izuku a hug. You are in. I told you, you did. Izuku laughed and gave him a hug in return, but their mother caught him off guard and joined in. Mom? I am incredibly happy for you, both of you, Inko said, tears building up. So many years she had feared for Izuku and his choice in wanting to be a hero. Even with how much he had trained, even when he was given a quirk, she still had fears. Himiko becoming part of their family only added onto those fears when she decided to go to UA even if she wasn't aiming to be a hero. She was a mother after all. You're both growing into wonderful people. Izuku gave her a tighter hug and remarked, I'm just taking after the best woman who raised me. Mama Inko, you are the greatest, Himiko concurred, following suit, and Inko couldn't contain her tears after that. My kids. Inko cried, hugging the life out of them. This lasted for a few minutes until she finally let go. Wiping her tears away, she offered them a wide smile. We should celebrate. I will make sure to prepare something immediately. Oh my. Let me assist you. With Izuku grinning behind them, Himiko and Inko headed straight to the kitchen. He was about to join in when he felt the hologram vibrate, and as he looked down at it, a letter appeared, causing his eyes to widen slightly. The fact that it explicitly stated that he was one out of 16 students in the class, 4 people were cut short, was what bothered him, not the fact that he was in 1A, which was confirmed by the class. Fuck. That means certain people won't make it. There's only 2 hero course classes too, meaning only 32 other people would make it. Wait. He quickly pulled out his phone and went directly to the group chat that he and his friends had created. Home in Usagiyama. 2 weeks later. Well, Raiko thought as he glanced across his partially empty room, this is it. Everything he wanted to bring to their new dorms had already been packed. In addition to a few items he simply couldn't bear to part with. How did I get sucked into this mess, Superhero University? His friends, I see. In any case, he would only find it tolerable at all because of his numerous reservations. Knowing how busy the hero life would be, he was just glad to continue hanging out with them. Also, he could always enroll in the general education course if he didn't think it was for him or if it didn't work out. As expected, UA was more than prepared for this kind of situation. If only he could now understand the terrible emotional harm he endured during the test. Nevertheless, he died, his family and parents were content, and he could now be free of. And then the door was kicked in. Hey, you packed up yet? Said Rumi, entering carelessly. She was dressed as a hero and probably ready to go on another patrol. Or beating time, as she loved to refer to it. She came in whistling. Yesh, the only thing you didn't take was the wallpaper. Longer if he could. Well, I'll be there for a while. Besides, you always talked about getting an official gym here. Might as well make it this room. Raiko had to fight the urge to roll his eyes as Rumi declared, much as I want to, this is your room. Recalling too many instances in which his personal space had been violated, Raiko said sardonically, don't know about that. You have a habit of breaking in here whenever you feel like. Raiko twitched at that, but as he had done numerous times before, he held it down. What? I had to make sure you weren't wasting away playing your games. Referring to her costume, Raiko remarked, "Right, don't you have some sort of patrol or something you gotta do?" Rumi sighed, obviously irritated. "Pardon me for wanting to see my little brother off to his first day of UA. I sorry, just having some jitters." He told the truth. Though he had been at it long enough to know that it was diluted when it came to him, he was fairly certain she knew how to spot that kind of bullshit. New school and all that. He frowned as Rumi laughed and asked, "Faye, is that all? You're gonna do great there, trust me." And you know that because, Raiko couldn't help but snort at that, but he quickly turned his head away. "Because, if I can make my way through then you definitely can. It helps that you're more level-headed than I ever was. Hope you filled out your course list by the way. Was hell for me when I got told I wouldn't just be doing heroics." More or less. Although he was still unsure about the hero thing, he wasn't going to brush it off as a joke or something simple. "Speaking of, I do have to get going though. University and all that." Rumi punched him in the shoulder and teased, "Okay, don't be lazy while you're over there. I'd hate to have to come by and give you a beating in front of all your classmates." As she walked out of the room, all he could do was laugh dryly. He waited until he was positive she was gone, and then he growled when he heard the front door close. He would also detest that. Class 1A, UA University. The first day of a new class, a new school, and the beginning of their journey to become heroes. Before any of that could actually start, Izuku Midoriya made sure he arrived first. The UA after their mother bid them farewell with tears, staff bots had already gathered his and Himiko's possessions from their house and left. Although they had different classes to attend, of course, they had agreed to get together as frequently as possible. He was currently considering his classmates and their potential identities. There was a chance that everything would have been entirely different because each hero class actually only had 16 students, and Katsuki was in a different class. Raiko and Kyoka were already confirmed in his class, but there was still a lot of uncertainty. And as annoying as it was, he had to be alert for who that might be. If Yuga Aoyama had been in this class, he would have easily made his list. With the lives of his family at stake, the poor boy was compelled to play spy for all for one. Izuku could understand, but he still had to be cautious. Even if he or someone else were to be a traitor, he couldn't really expose him right away. Even though he detested these kinds of thoughts, he still required some kind of proof that all for one was real. "Are you guys ready to talk, or am I simply not there yet?" Yeah, that makes sense. He had been attempting to establish some kind of connection with the other one for all users in order to genuinely receive some assistance throughout this entire ordeal. There hasn't been any luck like that yet, but it will happen eventually. In any case, he hoped. "I suppose I should wait until." Izuku became excited when he saw Iida enter the room with Uraraka following closely behind. "Ah, it's you," he exclaimed. "I had hoped to run into you again in UA." Uraraka exclaimed, "It's great to see you again, Midoriya," in her usual vivacious tone. It was genuinely comforting to hear. "Uraraka, Tenya. Glad to see you both made it." They were both undoubtedly among the most amiable individuals you would ever encounter. "I take it you got enough points then?" "No kidding. Your plan worked like a charm," Uraraka exclaimed with a smile and a raised fist. Iida put his glasses on and said, "Not to mention how you figured out the secret to the exam." Izuku laughed at their looks and said, "Secret? Oh, you mean the whole hero points thing? Not really something to figure out. More like, what's expected as a hero. After all, there's more to being a hero than just beating up a bunch of crooks." Iida looked down as Uraraka muttered, "When you say it out loud, it feels kinda silly not realizing it before." Before they could say anything more, Izuku continued, "Hey, why the down faces? You passed the exam and are now at the starting line. Take some pride in getting here." They both brightened up again, and Iida concurred, "Wise words, Midoriya, excellent." They simply didn't look depressed. "We have come this far and should give it our all in order to meet UA's expectations of us." He smiled as he held up a fresh notebook and said, "That's the spirit. Say, would you mind telling me about your quirks? I like recording them and thinking of ideas on how they can be improved upon." He could tell he had them captivated by their looks. Actually, Raiko had entered at that precise moment, his face neutral but irritated. He was about to approach him after spotting him when Iida abruptly approached, forcing him to suppress his urge to snarl. Dryly, Raiko said, "Can I help you?" Iida bowed his head and exclaimed, "Greetings. I would like to apologize for my behavior from the day of the entrance exam." Raiko took a step back, admitting that it had somewhat alarmed him. "I had allowed my nerves to take over and had taken it out on others. I do hope you accept my apology." Raiko accepted with a drop of perspiration. Sure. Just stop with the bowing thing. How rigid is this man? Of course. Iida got back up, but she was still as rigid as before. He extended a hand toward him. Iida Tenya, it is good to properly meet you. He simply sighed and chose to hold his hand. Raiko. Although it was obviously awkward on both sides, they shook. They soon relaxed, allowing him to finally sit at the desk with Izuku. Sup, guess we're here. When Izuku saw Kyoka entering next, he waved her over and said, we all are. Soon after, more pupils entered, and he already knew them all. When Mina Ishido and Toru Hagakure entered together, they immediately struck up a conversation and a friendship. Mina was a happy, laid-back, gregarious, and energetic person who loved spending time with her friends. She would tease anyone without hesitation and seemed to have boundless energy, particularly in relation to relationships. Toru had a very positive attitude and was vivacious, cheerful, and laid back. She was just as eager to fit in as Mina, but she was much more animated in her movements than the pink girl, which only made her more adorable. She was a dependable and compassionate classmate who was always willing to help out thanks to her own enthusiasm. Just behind them, with a big, shark-like smile, was Eijiro Kirishima, who was holding up their bags. Boisterous, gregarious, and fond of mannerlessness, which complemented his resolute and selfless demeanor. He was also incredibly kind and honest, and his loyalty was most evident when he was with his friends. Fumikage Tokiyami had entered quietly and proceeded directly to the rear. He appeared to be brooding, but based on the motion of his beck, it was probably an attempt to subdue Dark Shadow. The best way to characterize him would be reserved, serious, and focused, but he could also be embarrassed. In particular, Dark Shadow liked to play tricks on Tokiyami. Shoto Todoroki had followed suit, sitting in the front row and just waiting for their teacher to enter. He appeared to have the same family problems based on his scar. He appeared utterly emotionless, focused, and icy right now. Something that, if he could get the chance, would have to change. Momo Yaoyorozu intervened and noted each one as her eyes shifted between them. Probably to see what they were like. As one might anticipate from someone who aspired to become a professional hero, they were level-headed, compassionate, and poetic. Even though she was comparatively naive in some ways and might stumble if overpowered, she would quickly recover. When she entered, Tsuyu Asui had done something similar. However, it appeared that she was looking at them more out of curiosity than analysis. Straightforward and distant, she expresses her opinions freely and doesn't hesitate to share them with others. Because she loved her friends so much, she always made an effort to keep them out of trouble. The word was tried. And the last person who had typically made it into 1A was that person. He wasn't prepared for the extras that were present now. Above all, the biggest hater of 1A in a previous life, Nato Monoma, is now a classmate. He appeared to be attempting to engage Shoto in conversation, but Shoto was generally ignoring him or preoccupied. As far as the rival class was concerned, he was noisy, sarcastic, and mocking. In his real class, he was typically composed, considerate, and knowledgeable. Because he saw himself as a supporting character among the main characters, he also suffered from a slight inferiority complex. Another shock, Yui Kodai, came next. He couldn't tell what she was writing in her notebook at the moment. Some classmates even referred to Yui as a kadere because she was a quiet girl who rarely showed emotion. She simply struggled to express her feelings, not that she was emotionless. Nevertheless, she and the rest of the class were dependable friends despite her quiet manner. Togaru Kamakiri, who was in the corner nearer Tokiyami but was not talking to anyone, came in second to last. He was an aggressive, hot-blooded individual. It was almost like Katsuki. Extremely vivacious in battle, even expressing a desire to rip his opponents to pieces. But now he appeared more irate. The final one was what the devil is going on. Izuku's thoughts were racing as he slowly turned his head away from the last one, trying to maintain a neutral expression. What on earth is she doing in here? Kana Tsutsumi was my last classmate, also known as Lady Nagant, but now a student? Age changes are apparently fucking acceptable. Well, what did he recall about her? Quirk. To begin with, a rifle. Possessed additional quirks, but all for one was to blame. She was also formerly the Hero Commission's assassin, who used her to surreptitiously eliminate villains who were plotting terrorist attacks and dishonest heroes who were vying for greater notoriety and wealth. The stress gradually increased until she ultimately made the decision to shoot the final president of the Hero Commission, despite the fact that she was a pro-hero working for them. Thus, there were already a number of warning signs to be aware of. Fantastic. However, what if he was mistaken? Right now, the girl was going about her own business, apparently just wanting to be left alone. Even though her hair was currently pulled back in a ponytail and she was clearly as young as they were, he was put off by the serious look in her eyes. In the original, he remembered how thrilled the girl was to be a hero and assist others. When she got in touch with the Hero Commission and became their lapdog, it soured. Thus, the question of why she was here was raised. There were times when the headaches that came with knowing these things were not worth it, and his was approaching quickly. All right, I said, was already going to have to watch out for the Hero Commission. They were a constant source of annoyance in society, despite their perceived mediocrity. Thinking about this made him feel bad enough, but he would prefer not to wake up one day with a bullet in his head. When did I begin to think darkly like that? Well, there's no doubt that this is the best course of action. Nezu, leave it. He had serious doubts that Nezu would simply disregard any Hero Commission members who might approach. You all right? Raiko inquired after observing his face. Izuku, hoping for the best, replied, yeah, just thinking about the future. In addition, he wanted to divert his attention. Fortunately, his next diversion arrived in the shape of a moving sleeping bag. How is this going unnoticed by anyone else? Izuku looked straight at the bag and blinked. For a moment, he glanced over and saw that Raiko and Kyoka were also staring at the bag. Oh, I'm so grateful. There is still hope. Class 1A teacher Shoto Aizawa felt a mixture of emotions. His abilities as a teacher were dubious, perhaps because they weren't fully demonstrated. He was undoubtedly a great hero who gave his life for his students as if they were his own children. However, he could have done more to improve his teaching ethic than simply being a tough, unforgiving man. As he unzipped himself, he fixed the man with his gaze, maintaining it for a brief moment before he casually raised his hand to reveal his juice. But Izuku's gaze was fixed on his bare hand, and he was powerless to stop the audible gasp. His finger had a golden band around it. Has he been hitched? Since he had been reborn as Izuku, he made every effort to learn as much as he could about heroes. Despite his best efforts, he was never even vaguely aware of Aizawa's romantic life. Strange, huh? For some reason, I felt like a bunch of shippers were locked in. Strange. At last, Aizawa said, enough. The class fell silent at the abrupt interruption, and they all looked down from their seats to watch their teacher slowly get up. Welcome to UA's hero course. You all went silent quickly, good. I would have been annoyed if you didn't. Is this man a hero teacher? How come he's wearing a onesie? Eraserhead, Aizawa Shoto. Curse. Delete. Aizawa said in his monotone voice, my name is Shota Aizawa and I'll be your teacher. Anyway, let's get to it. Head to the locker rooms and gather your gym clothes before meeting me in the front field. Iida said, but sir, what about orientation, before he instantly fell silent under the intense stares. You're here to be heroes, not to waste time on things you'll learn later. Now, what are you waiting for? Aizawa sighed. With a sigh, the teacher hurried after the class as they hurried for the door. Let's see how this year does. Field, UA University, the entire class was assembled, standing in front of their teacher in their gym uniforms. The majority of them were anxious to approach the man, who appeared irritated, and they were curious about his identity. Aizawa, on the other hand, could not care less and looked around the classroom before speaking. Aizawa responded to them plainly, good, you're not lazy. Uncertain of what he would do if they disobeyed, they all remained silent. No interruptions. Even better. Today you'll be taking a quirk assignment test in order to test your limits properly. Standardized tests are good, but without knowing where you stand you'll never rise to UA's expectations. It hardly eased the students, but at least that made sense to them. The greenette snapped out of his reverie before catching a throwing ball. With that note, Izuku Midoriya. You got first place on the entrance exam, which means you get to go first. Throw the ball as hard as you can using your quirk. Izuku just shrugged and continued on. Before he eventually activated One for All at 10%, he stood beside Aizawa and struck his best pitching position. It was out of sight and in the air with a power throw, leaving behind a thunderous wind that had astonished almost everyone. After letting One for All fade, he was only able to nod his head before observing the enormous score of -999. I see now that it was capped. What a letdown. As he looked at them, Aizawa said in a very serious tone, there are only 3 years until you can become heroes. We cannot afford to waste time being friendly. These tests will judge what your strengths and weaknesses are. What you can or can't do. He then turned to Izuku. Head back to your spot. Yes, sir. He followed instructions and returned to his group of friends, but he knew what was about to happen when he noticed the increasing excitement in a few of the others. Oh boy. With a hint of glee, Kamakiri said, so we don't have to hold back? Kirishima exclaimed with joy, there's nothing more manly than a way to show off. Laughing, Mina added, all right, this seems like fun. And all of that was interrupted by a simple glare. Fun? You think this is fun? Aizawa glared at his prospective students, his red eyes sparkling. Fine then. In that case, how about this? The person who shows the least amount of potential will be kicked out from the hero course and placed into a general education class. If you all fail to impress, then you all get to go there together. Huh? Izuku thought, not entirely fazed by it, not getting kicked out. Whoever got married to him definitely made him a bit softer. It was obviously helpful to know it was coming, and the blow was a little less harsh now. Raiko mumbled, perspiring a little, talk about overkill. With strange composure, Shoto asked, so this is UA's hero course? However, his hand trembled a little. That's not fair, Uraraka stammered, clearly experiencing the same shock as the rest of the class. A lot of us worked hard to get here. Aizawa said, his glare unwavering as many of them winced, life's not fair. I won't teach those who don't show the slightest bit of potential. So, who's ready to prove themselves? Knowing now how serious their teacher was, many could only keep quiet. Having a teacher like Aizawa was a whole new experience for many of them. Izuku, on the other hand, had complete faith in the class and in himself. He at least hopped. Dash of 50 meters. It was easy for the class to not recognize the family names. Iida, Usagiyama. Get to the line. Both are the property of well-known heroes in their respective communities. Raiko could only snarl at it, but Iida seemed unconcerned. Usagiyama-san, let us try our hardest. Raiko could only stare at Iida before he patted him on the shoulder as he passed by. Iida said, more than ready to leave. Give me a call, Raiko. All right, buddy. After saying his piece, he headed to the track, where he and Raiko each took their respective running positions. Iida was much more professional than Raiko, even picking up a rock and jumping it on his foot. All set. Aizawa simply said, set, go, and set the timer. Having his engines ready, Iida launched himself into a full sprint, hardly needing a head start at all. He was more than ready for a trackside like this, and he expected to leave Raiko in the dust, but it wasn't malicious. It was just good sportsmanship as they tested the limits of their quirks. Nevertheless, he was ready to win this. At least that was his thought until he saw Raiko next to him in a flash, a silver flash with a bored expression on his face. Raiko's face was a mix of shock and boredom, but he ignored it and kicked the rock he had picked up away, sending it flying toward the finish line. Raiko then disappeared again, appearing at the line with the rock in hand, looking at it for a moment, then huffing and dropping it. Despite being genuinely impressed by Raiko's strategy to not only catch up to Iida but also pass him, Aizawa stated bluntly, time. Wow. You were far ahead of me, Iida said, halting beside him, and Raiko looked at him, a little taken aback that he wasn't offended. Not at all. The marks help of course, Raiko said languidly, pointing to Iida's back, but I just teleport. Well, instantly. What? Pulling his uniform around, he was shocked to see a simple little swirl there. Ah, my uniform at the gym. Calm down. As stated, the mark disappeared a short while later. I kind of need to mark places to actually use my quirk, the statement read. I just so happen to give it a little boost from you. I see how adaptable. Ignore the cleanliness. Raiko could only perspire, understanding that was the aspect he was more impressed by. Iida continued, more than pleased to have his uniform unmarked. You too. Get moving. From a distance, Aizawa gave the command, now. Both promptly followed it, and the following pair advanced. Strength of grip. RAAAAA. Kirishima roared, his quirk activated as he clenched the handheld device as hard as he could. Earning a solid score of 400.0 kilogram, he gave a fanged grin upon seeing it. All right. Whoa, you scored so well. Mina looked at Kyoka and exclaimed, blushing slightly in embarrassment at her score of 68.0. Kyoka gave a brief explanation, saying, it's not serious, just some serious training. What sort of instruction is that? Izuku was using one for all at the moment, slowly crushing the device in hand as the number was already in the 700s and rising, when Mina asked inquisitively and they turned their heads in response to a loud crunch. Watching Izuku with a slight flush, Kyoka muttered, that kind. Mina noticed it without realizing and couldn't help but smile. Long jumping standing. Aizawa noted her queasy expression but nothing significant as he watched Sue jump over the sandbox with ease and Uraraka do the same, floating over just enough to make it. It was Monoma's turn at last, and he stepped up, congratulating Uraraka on her quirk and patting her on the back before he jumped and pressed his fingers, floating across just as easily as Uraraka, much to her surprise. He is also able to use float. Uraraka questioned while Monoma made it over the sandbox. However, right after, he nearly hurled upon releasing himself. He gets sick too. Monoma said weakly, and not quite. Despite the awful feeling in his stomach, he forced himself to stand up and smirk slightly. My quirk is copy. I can replicate a quirk for 5 minutes at a time when we make skin contact. Whoa. That's really helpful, Uraraka said, causing Monoma to blink in surprise. The others added to his shock with similar remarks, but he smirked confidently as he turned to face them. I appreciate the praise, my dear classmates. Don't worry, it's only Gak. Eraserhead abruptly sewed his capture weapon around Monoma's head much more tightly than he had anticipated when he attempted to speak. Stop wasting time on me. They could do the meet and greet later. The test is still in effect, Aizawa stated, obviously irritated by the commentary. Much later, repeating side steps, sit-ups, seated toe touch, etc. There were numerous tests, but none that Izuku could not manage, and his class was performing well despite the fact that some of their quirks simply couldn't help with everything. The tests were now officially over, and the results were available. Izuku Midoriya 1st Yayorozu, the 2nd Momo. Shoto Todoroki, 3rd Tenya Iida, 4th Fumikage Tokiyami's 5th. Raiko Usagiyama, 6th Ariyo Kirishima, 7th. Tagaru Kamakiri, 8th Kyoka Jiro, 9th Mina Ashido, 10th. 11th Uraraka Ochako Suyu Asui, 12th Kana Tsutsumi, 13th. Yui Kodai's 14th Nato Monoma, 15th 16th Toru Hikugure. Toru tried to hide her whimper from seeing how low she was, but it wasn't much, and there wasn't much else she could do with her quirk for the test given. She couldn't help but shiver when she saw Aizawa's red glinting gaze on her, and then she jumped when she felt a slight nudge from her side, turning to face Izuku, whose gaze was much more reassuring and eased her a little. After giving it some thought, Aizawa said, well done, you managed by at least. Let's see how they handle this one. However, you finished the test last, Toru Hikugure. You will then be placed in a general course class. The responses came immediately. What, were you actual? Come on, that isn't even reasonable. I assumed he was just trying us out, but to really follow through? Mr. Aizawa. This is egregious abuse of authority on the part of someone in your position. In the UA not any less. It was actually kind of nice that everyone had chosen to speak out for Toru's sake in one way or another, Iida chanted, expressing their disagreement quite loudly. Oh, and you believe you are more knowledgeable than this teacher? Compared to a hero? Aizawa asked, his gaze settling onto the group. However, a slight smirk came across his face, his glowing red eyes fading. Fine then. I guess I've been a little unjust. When Izuku saw the Toru and the class brighten up, he thought, wait for it. With an air of smugness that only grew when he saw their horror and shock, Aizawa continued, in exchange to allow her into the hero course, one of you can happily give it. Izuku sighed and thought, there it is. It was Aizawa's idea to come up with a test that might cause people to change their minds. Wa. Iida was attempting to compose his response, but Aizawa went on. I would even go so far as to request that person to leave UA fully. Aizawa continued, only heightening the anxiety. UA can only take in people who have the capacity to become heroes. Feel free to give up that spot if you believe someone else deserves it. They had already earned the right to enter UA, and to lose that opportunity after so many years of hard work, well, it wasn't something that anyone could say they could do without much thought. Was the reason why everyone had shifted uneasily at the words, and who could blame them? Izuku raised his hand rather languidly and said, yo, she can have my spot. The class turned slowly toward him, and there was silence. What? You cannot simply say. What? After that, Raiko shouted, irritated at his casual demeanor. If Hagakure wanted to stay, he said, one of us would have to leave. Raiko couldn't help but gasp at Izuku's honest statement, I really don't mind. He was even here because of him, fucking dick. Wait a second. He had to look down at her as Toru swiftly grabbed his arm and said, you can't do that. On the entrance exam, you literally received the highest score. You are the one who deserves to be here. In the end, it's just a collection of figures. In addition to UA isn't the only hero school in Japan. Given his prior performance and his admission to the UA, he could easily get into another hero school. But I'm not worthy of this. Really? He's the one who actually did something to help me in the exam. Toru felt bad about the idea even coming to her, but she didn't want the thought of the guy who had saved her during the exam doing it to stay in her head. You would forfeit your opportunity to attend the best hero academy in Japan. Iida continued in the hopes of persuading his new friend to stay. To be honest, that's okay. That wasn't entirely false, though, as a lot of the story revolves around All Might and himself being at UA after all. If he was correct about Aizawa, this was just another test to put him to the test. Besides, UA is among the hundreds of hero schools that exist. My only objective is to become a hero, and if necessary, I can accomplish that anywhere else. Training was another factor, and even though UA was the best, it wasn't really a huge loss if you received the same slip of paper as any other school. But Toru was trying to put her words together in the hopes that he would reconsider. Consider it a kind of sacrifice. It was comforting to see them not reject the idea right away, even though it would have been expected. Heroes have to sacrifice a lot for people after all, and it only adds up over time, Izuku said, not missing the glances they sent him. In a way, it had struck their chords. Some looked moved, while others looked down with conflicted emotions. Are you certain you wish to proceed? With his setting on him, Aizawa questioned. I can assure you that going to another hero school isn't as easy as you think. Even so, you are less likely to enroll in another hero course. There would be a lengthy waiting list for you. I'll wait after that. Izuku smiled and looked into Aizawa's red-eyed glare, saying, my goal is to be a hero, plain and simple. Everyone probably thought he was crazy by now because of how he was acting, but they were all unable to speak. Should I leave now, or should I wait till the end of the day to pack up my things? You've got an annoying mouth on you. Aizawa's glare finally subsided, but he still had the same exhausted appearance, and no one could deny that he was at least impressed with Midoriya's attitude toward his threat. Too many times he had had to deal with crying, whining, and total mental breakdowns during these tests. But, no, you are welcome to stay. That also applies to Miss Hagakure. Really? The rest of the class shared Toru's astonished question, and for a brief moment, they believed their teacher was serious due to his intense demeanor. I take it that nobody is being expelled or demoted to a lower class. I was so unprepared for the stress today and I have to deal with this for 3 years? Raiko inquired, casting Aizawa a sidelong glance. Momo added, breathing in relief. Well, it was a little obvious that it was a ruse. She nearly fell for it, saying, I doubt a teacher of UA would reject a pupil based only on a test. Somehow, I doubt that, Raiko thought, observing the teacher's ominous expression. No, at UA we must make sure that our pupils can keep up with the instruction being given. This entails making sure that everyone is giving it their all, without exception. To make sure he had their attention, Aizawa clarified, but I also have to make sure you aren't complete morons with your current abilities either. I had no intention of expelling anyone who actually took this seriously. You can call it a logical fallacy, but it worked. Then he gave them a smile. Izuku could only snicker at their reactions until he was pinched by his sides and jumped. When he turned around, Kyoka was glaring at him and jacks were pointed at his eyes. The field's collective word was, scary. Izuku looked to Raiko for assistance, but he shook his head when he said, he. Izuku's feeble voice earned him an even harsher glare. Oh no, he was alone. What can you say about yourself, then? Kyoka inquired, obviously unhappy with his performance. Izuku decided it was best to say, I'm sorry for scaring you. Kyoka nodded, her jacks down, until she gave him a hard kick to the shin, causing him to wince. Okay, I deserve that. With a stern glare and a hand pressed to her forehead, Kyoka sighed and said, of course you do. Always gotta be a hero, huh? Gambling with someone like Aizawa was always risky, so, if it helps, I was absolutely terrified during that whole thing. But I had a feeling it would have worked out. Raiko's ears perked up slightly as he stretched out, right, because you could have totally known that shit was a sham. Izuku chuckled and looked back at the UA main building, thinking, ah, you sweet summer child. He then smiled slightly and said, well, we're in now. 3 years of superhero university and then we can become heroes. This is going to be annoying eventually, isn't it? A chill ran down his spine as he pondered this, his mind straying to the villain who aspired to become the Demon King. He sincerely hoped that his life would return to normal, but as soon as he realized who he was, he dashed that hope. Oh well. Dorm rooms, 1A, UA University, Izuku's dorm room. Izuku was sitting on his bed with his eyes closed and his legs crossed. He had one for all set to the lowest percentage possible and was meditating. The room was completely silent, with only the faintest sounds coming from an indoor fan and some people moving outside his door. Izuku opened his eyes, moaned, and collapsed back on his bed. Damn it. Upon his irritated outburst, one for all deactivated. Still don't feel like striking up a conversation, huh? He kept trying, but none of the users had gotten in touch with him yet. He had no idea whether they were ignoring him entirely or his current control was the reason it wasn't working for him. Perhaps the quirk changed and it would no longer be able to communicate with the previous users. He had to admit that the idea was not particularly appealing because, he thought, that day to the USJ would not be far off. He sighed and made the decision to shift his attention. Similar to school. The UA, at least in his opinion, Canon had more than dubious priorities regarding their system. There weren't many hero students, but there were a lot of general education students. You would think that the opposite would be true, but the school had strict admissions policies, and with good reason. It was somewhat different now that we were a university, but the same could be said here. First of all, Class 1A was exclusively for hero course classes and only for those that they had to take. What was the precise meaning of that? As part of what makes a student a hero, some hero courses were entirely optional and focused on teaching the student the skills they wanted to acquire in the future. For instance, you would need to take a course with snipe multiple times if you wanted to learn how to handle any type of gun, but others wouldn't have to. These classes were meticulously planned to ensure that the hero course classes would go ahead without a hitch at the end of the day. But there was also the mandatory extra of enrolling in regular university courses. Of course, you would get a degree if you stayed in one for the required number of years, which in their case was 3. Despite having the choice to enroll in classes like medicine, management, biology, agriculture, etc., they were still required to take those non-hero classes because of the schedules. This had a clear explanation. In the event that a hero student felt that being a hero wasn't what they wanted to do. It made sense because it was normal to have second thoughts about your desired future. It was shocking, if he was telling the truth, that none of the hero course students chose to quit their jobs after the war. There's no use in bringing that up, of course, because it was at the end, but still. The idea was that the hero game can be frightening and isn't always appropriate for everyone. This was demonstrated by the Paranormal Liberation War, which ended with heroes everywhere giving up. The destruction that day turned their perfect world upside down, and even though the heroes survived, it was a true loss for them. He could never hold them responsible for it, even though some people may have called them cowards for it. Izuku, meanwhile, continued to complete the necessary regular courses in addition to earning a quirk analyst degree and possibly a teacher degree. In his previous life, he was an office worker, one of many who worked tirelessly to keep their business afloat. He was going to be a hero, of course, but he didn't want that to be his only identity. There are far too many heroes in the world who are essentially limited to that persona. Hero work without double lives or secret identities. Izuku wanted to fulfill his duties and have a fulfilling life, not just be another hero or even number one. He rolled out of bed and walked over to his desk. With just a few pieces of his hero merch to display, his room was as normal as it could be right now. A whole closet was crammed with notebooks, so he grabbed one and took a seat. The weighted clothes he had hidden in the corner, which he intended to use when he did visit the gym, were the only other noteworthy item. All right, let's brainstorm some concepts for the hero suit of the future. The UA, despite having an absurdly large budget, there were still restrictions. In addition to what was required, first-year students were allowed to add anything they wanted. They were just getting started, so it made some sense. Not only that, but the egotistical, smart quirk had people he learned about, so he could still use what he was able to make. Perhaps it was a bit simplistic, but sometimes the most difficult problems had the easiest fixes. Remembering how the slime villain was defeated with just a taser, he snorted and wondered how many times he could get away with it. Class 1A, UA University. Later, with his back to the wall, Raiko complained to Kyoka and Izuku, "So now me and the other students have to wait till next week to start our class." They were all waiting for the next class to start while sporting the standard uniform. Raiko snorted as Kyoka remarked, "Can't lie, out of everything I was expecting you to take up, firearms were far from close." The rabbit-eared man shrugged and said, "I thought it was a good idea. Have an ace up my sleeve and all that. Besides, it's not like I'm going for anything over the top. A handgun would be nice. Maybe a sniper." Dryly, Kyoka remarked, "You're going to be something of a menace. Teleporting, knives, kicking and now a handgun." Izuku continued, "You never did say where you'd learn how to use a knife." "One of my sisters. She works in Russia as part of a security detail." "Ah, that explains it all." Kyoka grinned and said, "And yet despite all of that, you still can't tie a tie." Raiko actually paused and glanced down to see his tie tangled and a little messed up. As Raiko began to attempt to fix it, he growled, "Oh, for fuck's sake. I swear, these things are not designed for me." He growled as Kyoka continued, "Or you don't know how to tie properly." He started to say more, but was interrupted by a faint cough from behind. To his surprise, Momo was there when he turned around. Momo unexpectedly greeted Raiko with a broad smile and said, "Hello there, your name is Raiko Usagiyama, correct? My name is Momo Yayorozu. It's nice to meet you." She gestured to his untidy tie, and he nodded. "Would you like some assistance?" He halted when he realized he had inadvertently caught his finger in a loop. "What, this? No, I think I have it hand," I said. "Oh, come on." Momo approached Raiko and began retying his tie before Raiko could say no. "Here, allow me." The encounter caused him to become somewhat rigid. He was far from scared of being near one, thanks to his frequent arguments with Rumi. But this one made him think about how intimate it is. There, that should do it. When he looked down, he saw that his tie was perfectly tailored and snug around his neck. Thanks. She looked at each of them and said, "Of course. I hope we all become good friends after all." Raiko could only nod as she made her way to her seat and said, "Oh, class should be starting soon." He could feel Kyoka and Izuku's combined smirks behind him. "What? Nothing. No, seriously, what?" he asked without receiving a response, and like the rest of the class, he hurried to his seat when he heard footsteps approaching. The class then waited for their hero course teacher. Izuku chuckled, perplexing those around him, "And here he comes. And here I enter, as a hero teacher," exclaimed All Might as he entered the door in a rather strange way. People usually just laugh or get weirded out when something like this occurs. However, this was All Might, the world's and Japan's most popular hero. With a look of shock on his face, Kamakiri muttered, "Holy shit, it's actually All Might." But a broad smile appeared on his face. "I want to face him." Excited, Kirishima yelled, "No way, I heard rumors, but I didn't believe it." "I know, right," Mina enthusiastically concurred. Asui shivered and remarked, "Isn't that his Silver Age costume? I'm getting goosebumps just looking at it." With the exception of a few, almost all of the students had left comments about All Might. Raiko asked, "Why is he standing like that?" as the sight of the foolish pose caused her brain to reset. With his fist on his hips, All Might greeted the students, "Welcome to the most important course at UA. Heroics 101. I am Professor All Might and I shall be one of many that will guide you on the path of becoming a true hero." When he saw Izuku and his friends laughing at him, his smile got bigger. But he needed to stay focused. "Here you will know the basics of being a pro and what it means to fight for the name of good. Let's get into today's lesson and pull no punches. Today we'll be doing battle training." Our first day? Awesome." All Might pressed a button he had hidden away and exclaimed, "Ha ha ha." It's nice to see everyone eager to begin. However, we must not rush ourselves now. After all, you haven't even received your hero costumes. As a number of metal suitcases fell onto the student's desk, the ceiling abruptly opened. Your requested gear and equipment should all be provided for, based around the details provided and to fit your quirk. If you are missing something, there should be a letter inside explaining why. When Izuku heard this and noticed the letter protruding, he blinked. He could only sulk after reading it for a moment. They'd have to wait. Air shoes. With the students unable to contain their excitement, All Might commanded, "Now then, there's a lot to go over, but I don't want to keep the next generation of heroes waiting. Hit the lockers and put on your costumes. Afterwards, meet me at Training Ground Beta." As the students could only nod. "Now I make my exit, do not be late." He laughed all the way out of the room after saying that. Izuku said out loud, "He's such a dork." This caused either snorts of laughter or gasps of disbelief. He stood up with his case in hand before anyone could speak. "No time to waste, let's go." His example was swiftly followed by everyone, who were eager to get going and showcase their actual work. Training Ground Zero at UA University. When Izuku entered the room wearing his costume, all he could do was hum to himself. First of all, he had decided to maintain Izuku's original iconic color scheme while adding his own unique twist to the design. Thus, when he was creating his official costume, he drew some inspiration from heroes and even some villains. He had put on a dark green combat vest with a black lining that ran down the back of his back, a black muscle shirt, and dark pants with a pouch on the left leg. He was wearing crimson boots with padded gloves that reached his elbows. A prominent multi-tool belt around his waist held a variety of objects, none of which anyone should be able to identify, and at the end was a dark green helmet with no mouth or eyes. His hero costume's Alpha version was the official one. Something as realistic as possible while staying well within the budget. He wasn't ashamed to admit that Red Hood from DC served as the inspiration for this one. With hundreds and hundreds of different heroes, it was difficult to be unique. Besides, he liked the laid-back style better than running around in a onesie. After all, he was somewhat ashamed. Raiko followed closely behind, sharing the same notion of a laid-back style. Unzipped, a grayish hoodie reveals a red V-neck shirt, black trousers, and gray boots. Another belt around his waist held 4 kuniyas-shaped knives. He wanted to be a hero, but he wasn't making a big effort to look like one. "Can't you split an island in half or something?" Raiko asked sarcastically. "Do you seriously need all that?" Izuku rolled his eyes and questioned, "Do you need something so sharp?" Raiko growled back, "No, but it at least matches my quirk." Soon after, more of their classmates entered, flaunting their own hero costumes as they walked back and forth. Huh. Everyone looks just about the same. It was true that, aside from getting older, their fashion choices were identical to those of their original selves. Given that the budget was in effect and that situation would not be getting better anytime soon, it made sense. He reminded himself that Nagakena was still dressed as a hero. Why is everyone using so little support equipment? Are we certain that he doesn't possess a quirk that prevents him from calling forth his shit? As he watched the pen and notebook suddenly materialize in his friend's hands, Raiko asked. When they didn't hear back, they moved to a wall and Kyoka joined them. Not long afterward, All Might rushed in, his face displaying a shy expression. Before they could ask any questions, he continued, his smile strained. "Forgive me, students. I had to get some extra paperwork done. Today we will be starting battle training. These classes will involve real-life scenarios where you will be paired with a partner to go against another team. The teams as of today will be randomly picked out." Mina moaned and turned to Kirishima, saying, "What? Aw man. So much for working together." Kirishima smiled and said, "It's cool, Mina, I'm sure there's a good reason." All Might said, grinning at some of his memories with his fellow heroes and protégés, "You are right, young Kirishima. In the real world, you can't always tell who your partner is and sometimes you will find yourselves needing help you wouldn't expect. I've even needed to do the same thing when the situation calls for it. I have limits in what I can do." They collaborated despite some negative and some positive aspects. Hence why it's good to know your limits as well and how having a partner can cover what you can't do. From behind, Izuku heard Shoto scoff, but nobody said anything. He saw the bewildered and excited expressions on their faces and said, "As you know, all teachers within UA have had their fair share of cases. Which is why we devised similar scenarios based on our own based experiences. Of course we won't be throwing anything major at you just yet. It's your first day after all. You'll have basic, but different scenarios to perform in order to not give everyone the same ideas to try out. Not the bomb test alone. Cool." All Might pressed a button on his board and a television screen descended from the ceiling as he said, "Now then, I've already had your teams randomized and made up to fight against the other team with eyes to the screen please." Following instructions, they soon learned who they were paired with, who they had to battle, and the scenario's focus. Momo Yaoyorozu and Ochako Uraraka are the villains, while Shoto Todoroki and Toru Hagakure are the heroes. Task: the chase game, villains, Togaru Kamakiri and Iida Tenya vs. heroes, Nato Monoma and Kyoka Jiro. Task: defusing bombs, villains, Izuku Midoriya and Tsuyu Asui vs. heroes, Fumikage Tokiyami and Eijiro Kirishima. Building assault is the assignment. Raiko Usagiyama and Mina Ishido, heroes, vs. Yui Kodai and Kana Tsutsumi, villains. Task: hostage circumstance. Are you paired with Asui? That might work out, Izuku thought, casting a quick glance at the opposing team. Even so, they are stacked for both defense and attack. A solid plan will be required for them. "You're Midoriya, right?" Asui approached him, her face unreadable but still endearing. She confused him by tilting her head and saying, "That would be me. It'll be nice working with you, Asui." Izuku could only laugh and nod when he said, "I have a good feeling about you. Call me Sue." After joining Uraraka, Momo remarked, "It looks as though we are first and with a tough opponent." Uraraka's enthusiasm made the taller girl smile. "Don't worry, we'll get through it," Uraraka said. She shivered a little, though, when she saw Todoroki's contemptuous gaze directed at them. She had a chance to win. Yui hummed as she walked up to Kana. She looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded her head in agreement and hummed to herself. A tacit understanding reached with their collaboration. Iida approached his now glaring partner and exclaimed, Kamakiri. It is an honor to be partnered up with you. Iida went on without noticing. I don't know much about our opponents, but I'm sure if we put our minds together we can. Wait, where are you going? He wasn't going to speak to any of them, so he said, doing some solo thinking. Not at this moment. He walked to the window and glanced at the others, giving Midoriya a particular look. I'll show you everything. The next #1 hero will be me. Nobody else. Observing how everyone awoke with excitement, All Might declared, all right. It's time to get started with our first test of the year. He was relieved to see so many of them prepared to leave, but he still had to act fairly, just as he always had. Hero classes began their first day today. Battlezone 1. Urban Neighborhood, UA University. The chase game was easy to comprehend. Momo and Uraraka, the villains, had to flee and avoid the heroes, Toru and Todoroki. The heroes had to either capture or defeat the villains, who could either defeat the enemy team or escape them to the checkpoint area. Even though it was a routine test, it was still significant. As a result, Momo had just a few minutes before they started to consider their first move. His status as the son of the #2 hero attested to the fact that, even though his face was emotionless, there was more than enough confidence in those eyes to convey the statement, while I do not know much about Todoroki and how his quirk works, I know he is the most dangerous of the two. I don't doubt our own ability, but our best course of action would be to avoid them completely. Momo shook her head when Uraraka said, oh, maybe you can make that scooter you had before. We can outpace them that way. While discussing their best option, Momo clarified, I'm not sure that going straight to the exit is our best play. We'd likely draw their attention and that's the last thing we need. Never mind, we'd have to be on the lookout for Toru. If anything, keeping it slow and steady while moving throughout the buildings would be our best move. Assuming they don't just wait for us at the end. At that point, we may just have to fight. Uraraka said, well, I'll have your back the entire time, count on it, and Momo grinned. At least she had a trustworthy partner, which was more than enough to motivate her to put in her best effort. After making a stun gun and giving it to Uraraka, Momo remarked, here, this might be able to give us an edge. If things get hairy, don't hesitate to use it if we need to. Uraraka hummed, and took the gadget. Their teacher was on the intercom after Momo demonstrated how to use it. Over the intercom, All Might yelled, everyone ready? The exam starts. Now. Momo said, let's move out. Uraraka nodded in agreement. They stayed out of sight, adhering to the fundamentals of the plan. At first, I had to move between alleyways because they were so fast. They were aware of the large number of civil bots roaming around and performing their assigned tasks in light of the surroundings. We should avoid any attention towards ourselves and stay out of sight. As they awaited the ideal moment to depart, Uraraka nodded. They are moving down a few more blocks of the street in the hopes of getting to their destination safely. Both of the enemy teams had not yet been seen, which had only made them more anxious as they moved forward. But the most important thing was that they were moving forward. That's what they believed, anyway, until Todoroki unexpectedly appeared in front of them from around the corner. He swung his hand forward as a tiny wave of ice approached them without saying a word. Momo was able to act quickly enough to make a grapple gun, grab Uraraka, and shoot it up. Todoroki's eyes followed them as they were drawn up to the roof before the ice could trap them. They swiftly made their way across the roof as they landed, but a wall of ice blocked their way. She swore to herself and turned around to see Todoroki, holding his own block of ice, rising on the roof. Give up now. I'd rather not have to freeze you both over too harsh. A painful electric shock passed through him before he could finish when two wires suddenly struck his chest. When he looked up, Momo was hurrying forward with a bowstaff already prepared, and Uraraka was glaring at him fiercely. He lifted his arm and tore the taser from him, but Momo abruptly knocked him back into his ice. When he attempted to raise his hand once more, something fell into his lap and he had stopped in place, holding up his eyes to protect himself from a blinding white light. In the meantime, Momo had quickly made a blanket to shield Uraraka and herself from the light. They were long gone when it subsided and Shoto felt his vision return. His eyes narrowed in irritation as he pursued them to the point where they were forced to leave. In the meantime, Momo and Uraraka were actually heading toward them via rooftop. They were moving quickly thanks to the grapple gun and Uraraka's quirk. There were civil bots running away from them, but they ignored them. Based on the increasing ice spikes behind them, it was clear that Todoroki was pursuing them. Uraraka became alarmed when she noticed the expanding glaciers behind them and exclaimed, shouldn't he be slower than that? As they were forced to land on the street, Momo explained, he's the son of the #2 hero. I wouldn't be surprised if we only got lucky with our escape before. While Momo debated the risk of turning them into a vehicle, they moved quickly. What are the chances that Todoroki won't make something big enough to catch us if I make something like that? I'm waiting. Where's? Uraraka yelled. Up ahead. The gate. As Momo instantly became alert. They might be able to outpace Todoroki entirely if they could just make it. Just a little further and then we can. Say cheese. Was all they could hear before a bright white light blinded them. In contrast to the flash grenade, this one appeared to be continuous, leaving them stunned and with little time to react. Toru made sure to keep herself away from Momo and Uraraka, who were unable to even organize their thoughts in the sudden light. Sorry girls. They were frozen in place, only their heads showing, before either of them could put their hands together. As Todoroki entered the scene, his annoyance hardly subdued by the capture, they shivered violently. Uraraka groaned as All Might exclaimed, "It's over, Hero Team wins." Momo looked down in embarrassment. In celebration of the win, Toru couldn't help but cheer, while Todoroki sulked. Not good enough. Todoroki made his own judgment. He was aware that he was far stronger than most of the people in his class. He could have covered the roads with enormous ice glaciers and ended the test in a matter of seconds. He did, however, take into account the civil bots that were wandering around after Toru swiftly identified them. I must improve upon this. That kind of surprise should never have occurred, and it won't happen again. Not good enough. It reminded Momo of Todoroki. She was reviewing the test repeatedly, considering the adjustments she ought to have made while taking it. Perhaps she ought to have followed Uraraka's advice and built a swift vehicle to reach the finish line, but the danger remained. She believed she could have done much better, even when considering the possibility of facing someone like Todoroki. Maybe even defeat Todoroki. Next time, I'll figure out a way to win. She had promised that. Bomb Building 2, at the University of Arizona. After finishing one exam, the next one was prepared. In order to defuse a bomb, the heroes, Kyoka and Monoma, had to get ready to enter a building with a police bot. Iida and Kamakiri, the villains who planted the bomb, had to do everything in their power to keep it safe. Both were within the 5-minute time limit. The heroes would win if they could get the bomb diffuser to the fake bomb in time, but if it didn't, the villains would have won. The police bot was just another civil bot wearing a police hat and vest. Hello. I am Vic. I will be your personal bomb diffuser unit for the exam, it said. A kit was also set up beside him. Please prevent my untimely demise so I may get home to my family. Kyoka acknowledged the emotional harm Raiko was discussing and said, sure. She turned to her partner, aware that their test was about to begin. Hey, Monoma Riha? Monoma grunted and rolled back his sleeve, which was glowing, saying, one moment. From a grapple gun to even some wires, a number of objects were visible emerging, but they looked far more basic. Damn, it's far more complex than I thought. He nodded in response to Kyoka's question, you copied Yaoyorozu's quirk? With his usual sarcasm gone at the moment, Monoma clarified, copy can only last for 5 minutes, which is the same as our prep time before entering the building. This was the best I can do when it comes to that. Iida is from a prominent line of heroes, his brother easily currently leading on with their family name. I doubt he himself is weak, nor is he hot-headed, but the building has more than a few tight corners, which we should take advantage of. Kyoka continued, recalling a much meaner and more untamed Katsuki, maybe, but I doubt he'd just rush in and away from the bomb. If anything, Kamakiri is gonna be the one to do that. Dude looks way too eager to fight. Doubt those blades on his arms are simple either. If he's in the hero course, I wouldn't put it past him to actually be able to cut through concrete to try and catch us by surprise. But I should be able to track them down. Monoma continued, sounding surprised. He does seem quite irritable. I wouldn't put it past him to ditch Iida either. Her ability to think so far ahead surprised him. It seemed unusual. We may be able to have an edge if we use what we have. With a sense of relief at finally having a collaborator, Kyoka said, then let's get to work. But she couldn't resist asking her next query. So, what else can you do? With genuine confusion, Monoma retorted, what do you mean? I've already explained copy. Oh, shit. This could be a problem, later. Kamakiri was running down the hallway, his mood sour, snarling. Iida had attempted to make a plan before the exam began, but he ignored him and departed as soon as he was given permission. He had every intention of going straight to the particular pair and subduing them. The victory is exclusively his. He didn't believe he required any assistance. He really thought they would fight instead of running away like cowards, of course. With his blades at the ready, Kamakiri snapped around the corner and snarled, come on out and take it already. Once more, he encountered nothing. Furious at his lack of progress, he yelled again. But when he heard a tiny dispersing sound, his ears pricked up. He hurried forward without thinking about anything else and ended up entering a room by the corner. He rushed in and was immediately snagged by a number of wires that limited his motion and caused him to hit the ground head first. "The fuck?" exclaimed Kamakiri, savagely battling his restraints. But then he felt something prick his neck, and then he felt a strong vibration run through his body, and finally he went completely limp. All Might declared, "Kamakiri has been eliminated," as Kyoka swore. Did he need to make that announcement? Forget the first test? Kyoka pulled her jack out of Kamakiri and said, "We better get moving. I don't know how Iida is gonna react." As he brought the bomb diffuser from around the corner and they left the room, Monoma could only nod. Not going to wake up anytime soon, leaving Kamakiri where he was. As they ascended the floors, they kept the robot well behind them in case Iida suddenly pulled a fast one. But throughout the entire time, they never challenged him. While Kyoka pressed a jack against the wall, they halted at the door on their way to the top floor. "Muahahaha. Foolish heroes. You may have taken down my pawn, but now you stand before Iida Tenya, the most villainous villain WHO has ever stepped on UAS soil. Prepare yourself, heroes, for this bomb is armed and ready to destroy all of the world. Muahahaha." "He's a little too dramatic for a strict guy," Kyoka remarked, drawing back her jack. "He's in there all right. All we have to do is get our guy to the bomb and touch it for the win. No way we can rush it with how fast he is though." After being able to get a quick look, Monoma remarked, "Which leaves sneaking in, but there's not a lot of cover in that room to work with. I say we go for a distraction. Least on my part." "You sure? You can handle that?" Monoma exuded confidence as he said, "Of course." All Kyoka could do was nod and motion for the bomb bot to accompany her. After inhaling, Monoma turned the corner with the largest, most asshole-related grin. Monoma began, echoing Iida's tone, "Iida Tenya. Then. You're certainly worthy of calling yourself a villain, but you are no match for I, the Phantom Thief of Japan." Immediately resuming his role, Iida exclaimed, "Oh, are you approaching me, hero? Be wary, for I am the Fleetfoot of pure Villainry. This bomb is armed. This bomb is active. This bomb will ruin the world. Foolish villain. That bomb will be destroyed by yours truly, for you see, AIDITOIC criminal as yourself could never begin to comprehend the power I hold." As Kyoka imagined her friends attempting and failing to laugh at the scene in front of them, she thought, "I can feel them laughing." She made herself concentrate on the current task and guide the bomb bot to its destination. From a different entrance, she could see that Monoma was doing a pretty good job of diverting Iida's attention. That's how it appeared, anyway. Because Iida was running toward Monoma and kicking him into a wall at almost blinding speed. The next thing she knew, she was totally unprepared for the sudden acceleration, and even more so when he turned to look at her. "I'm more than well aware of this tactic. I have you now." Shit. Kyoka was thrown flying backwards into the bomb unit before she could even react. Although it was officially destroyed, it broke her fall as they collided with multiple pallets. As an alarm sounded, Kyoka attempted to stand up, but Iida was already on her, his foot halting at her head. "Enough. NATO MONOMA and the bomb unit are out. The win goes to the villain team," announced All Might. Iida offered a hand after yanking his leg away from her head. "It was a grand idea, trying to distract me. However, I've heard similar tales from my brother, unfortunately," Iida admitted, his tone firm, but respectful. "Yet you took down my teammates and without sustaining injuries. Given it's our first day, to you I must say you and Monoma have done outstandingly." Kyoka took his hand and effortlessly raised her up, saying, "Blah, you're lucky I can tell when people are bullshitting me." Iida rolled his eyes at him and said sternly, "Please refrain from using such language." Monoma, meanwhile, continued to grip his stomach and made a concerted effort not to throw up. Medic, University of Arizona, False Police Station 7. The next task was building Assault, in which Tokiyami and Kirishima played heroes protecting a police station while Izuku and Sue played villains attacking the structure. The villains had to formally defeat the heroes and set their flag in the main room after they had defended the building for 10 minutes. The heroes also had 5 additional civil bots posing as police officers. Izuku and Suyu were looking at the building schematics with 5 minutes to spare. Since it was the first test, many significant flaws were immediately apparent. The vent system seemed a bit too simple to understand, and there were many different windows leading to the entry. Even the center room had a noteworthy skylight, but as far as they could see, it had been shuttered off. Izuku started by outlining what he thought would be their best strategy. I have to say, stealth may be our best play here. Between Tokiyami and Kirishima, Tokiyami seems to be the more level-headed of the two by a long mile, so he'll likely take control and have them focus on defending their point. But separating them would be for the best in order to take them down individually. Before that, however, those 5 bots have to go down and they'll no doubt have them patrolling. They should be simple enough to deal with before we have to deal with the major threats. When Izuku heard the hum, he blinked and turned to face Tsuyu, who was wearing a contemplative expression. Hiro. You're a lot more thoughtful than I had originally believed. I thought you would suggest going in through the front door. Izuku laughed as he said, we could, but this causes less property damage. But no, a full-on attack might end badly for us, especially with who we are up against. Tsuyu nodded in agreement, saying, they won't be slouches, that's for sure. I think Tokiyami would be the more dangerous of the two. Dark Shadow was a unique individual who should never be taken lightly. She gave Izuku a blank nod when he said, it wouldn't surprise me, but between the two of us we can take both of them down. It's kind of hard to read. Just gotta be tricky about how we proceed. Tricky? Tsuyu asked, tilting her head. He just smiled as he reached into his inner coat and took out a black-coated slingshot. Kiro. Later. Perimeter secure, sir, reported a police bot, saluting. 1 minute until report. Very good. Tokiyami hummed in agreement. In order to keep an eye out for their adversaries, he had assigned the machines to patrol specific routes. If he was telling the truth, he knew they wouldn't be able to do much, but he would be the first to know and could take action if any of them were taken down. Keep in contact with them, no matter what. Of course, sir, instructed the police bot. All Tokiyami could do was nod before he felt a poke in his shoulder. Tokiyami sighed and said, yes, Dark Shadow? With an irritated expression on its face, Dark Shadow said, can't we just go out there and get them? Tokiyami was about to respond when Kirishima leapt to her feet. Yeah, we should just get straight into the fight, exclaimed the man with the red theme, demonstrating his excitement. No, as I've said before, I doubt they would just come in here head first. It would be wise to allow them to come to us. Only then would our fight commence. Tokiyami stated categorically. He didn't want to take the chance of making any needless moves against the other team. Dark Shadow complained, but it's so boring. Kirishima concurred. Silence, my dark half. We must keep a clear head while we wait. Tokiyami responded. Once we know where they come from, Kirishima will be the one to head after them. We must remain here and guard our point or else all could be lost. Kirishima felt his fire wane a little and said, yeah, he kinda does have a point. With its arms crossed, Dark Shadow asserted, doesn't mean he has to be overdramatic about it. Yami. Then the police bot said, minute report is ready, sir, while interrupting them. Report. Yes. All units have completed their patrol. No villains within the premises. They were perplexed. They would have lost based on time if they hadn't been inside the building by now. If I may, after this is all over, we should head and get some stogies from. Before he could finish, he ran a hard, small object into its head, knocking it over. Kirishima exclaimed, whoa! As Dark Shadow moved ahead of them. Tokiyami immediately turned to face the direction of the attack and saw Izuku wearing a helmet on the second floor. Izuku turned and hurried for an exit after saying, that's one down, hero. As he hurried up the stairs after him, Kirishima yelled, you're not getting away, Midwaya. His body hardened. Tokiyami quickly used his own earpiece and swore, damn it. All officers, remain on guard, there are villains within the building. 3 of 5 officers have been taken down. What's that? That fast? I guess Tsuyu went for them. Dark Shadow snarled, yo. Are we still hanging around here or are we gonna bust some heads? Dark Shadow gave a small growl in response to Tokiyami's statement, we must stay. They must take control of this point in order to complete their task. We can only hope that we outtime them if necessary. And meet them in combat when they must come here. Despite this, Dark Shadow complied. All the while being oblivious to someone scaling the wall. Kirishima, meanwhile, was sprinting down a corridor, looking back and forth between the rooms he passed in the hopes of seeing Izuku. Come on out, Midoriya. It isn't manly to hit and run. He hurried around the corner after hearing some footsteps and raised his fist in attack. Only to quickly stop when 2 of the police bots were spotted doing the same. The police bot joyfully answered, oh, hello sir. We are looking for the criminal. Much more impolitely, the other asked, did you see one of them? Not yet, but we'll get him. Kirishima made the decision. Just stick with me, Robo Bros. But the police bots trailed him down another corridor, saying, "I ain't ya bro." The hallways were poorly lit, and Kirishima continued to scan the area while preparing for an attack, while the bots used their flashlights to peer into the rooms they passed. Not so much, though, because Izuku abruptly fell between them from a vent. Just as Kirishima turned, he landed on his hand, kicked backwards, and sent the two police bots crashing back into a wall. He raised his fist and threw it with a roar, but Izuku leapt away and gained distance. In his haste to attack, Kirishima was taken aback when the greenette produced a slingshot with a dark red ball. Usopp tactics. Tabasco star. Kirishima raised his hands in self-defense as he released the ball. Tabasco sauce exploded all over his face and into his eyes as it struck. He screamed, unable to help, but to grab his eyes. But Izuku continued, reaching for a grapple gun at his side. It hit Kirishima's chest and then yanked him forward, and he fired it. The red-themed man should have been knocked down by the force of his arm swing, but he successfully resisted and glared at him with red eyes. He was able to quickly throw Izuku away with sufficient force. He paused and wiped his eyes as fast as he could. In spite of the pain, Kirishima screamed, "Ga, come on and let's get right into it," and prepared to engage in combat. He was able to see Izuku ahead of him thanks to his good vision, and he began to swing. He delivered heavy, sharp blows, but none of them landed as Izuku continued to back away and avoid him. As one for all swept through him, Izuku thought, "No time, 5%. Swinging around Kirishima, he grabbed the incoming fist and slammed him into the well, incorporating him into it. He barely had time to look up before a foot struck his head, knocking him out cold. "Sorry, Kirishima. We can have a real fight next time." He then began to dash back to the main room. Eijiro Kirishima and the remaining officers have been taken out. Tokiyami looked around the entry points and clicked his tongue in response to the news. As Dark Shadow prepared, his eyes narrowed. Dark Shadow. Northwest corner. It sprang forward without further ado. Claws first, it ripped into the wall and, when Tsuyu moved, it made her reveal herself. Camouflage. I had a feeling. With a roar, Dark Shadow sprang forward, reaching out with its arms to grab the girl with the frog theme. In response, Tsuyu leapt out of the way of the claws and drew as far away from the sentient quirk as she could. Even though it was swift and violent, Tsuyu managed to stay nimble and avoid it. But time was running out, and Dark Shadow was successfully occupying her. Holding his ground, Tokiyami said, "Stand down, Asui-san. You will not beat us in straight combat." With her free hand reaching behind her, Tsuyu pulled up her goggles and leapt onto a pillar. Leaping up to dodge Dark Shadow's claws again, he said, "Sorry, Tokiyami-san. But giving up easily is not my style." Tokiyami gritted his teeth as it let out an irritated growl. He could see that Dark Shadow was growing increasingly agitated, which put them all in danger. Izuku made his presence known at this point. Leaping from the second story, he had a silver ball ready for his slingshot. Usopp tactics. Smoke Star. Su took a moment to pull away, but Tokiyami swiftly lifted his cape. As soon as the ball hit, a cloud of smoke burst forth, swiftly filling the room. With a growl, Dark Shadow swept its arms around to dispel the smoke. It wasn't prepared for Izuku to dive down with a taser and land on its head. But as he landed on a pillar, Dark Shadow was able to hit him away before he could use it. Izuku remained silent as they gazed at one another for a moment, Dark Shadow's glare growing more intense. In the smoke, Tokiyami was able to spot them both preparing to issue the order. Dark Shadow Ga was his plan, at least until a long tongue snagged him around his waist. Before he knew it, he was being pulled from his position and thrown against a wall, where he lost consciousness. Su retracted her tongue and said, as plain and direct as ever, "You forgot about me." Dark Shadow turned to see the impact and exclaimed, "Fumi." When the alarm went off, it let out an angry growl. Dark Shadow growled in frustration as All Might yelled, "Fumikage Tokiyami has been eliminated and the flag has been placed. The villain team wins," and snapped back to Izuku while holding the flag on the table. As soon as Dark Shadow saw Tokiyami, its expression changed to one of concern. "Damn it. Fumi!" it exclaimed. He opened his eyes and moaned, lightly slapping his face. "Yamiko?" Tokiyami asked, and Dark Shadow, who was rambling on about how anxious she was, gave her a tender embrace. As he soothed it, all he could do was sigh. As she joined him, Izuku commended her, saying, "Nice work, Tsuyu." He blinked in surprise as Tsuyu said, "Call me Su." Su. Su smiled and said, "Good. It was nice working with you, Midoriya-chan." You're stranger than I expected and you look like the type who gets in trouble often. Not inaccurate, Sue asserted, but you'll be a good friend here. I can tell. She received a smile in response. They all heard a moan as Kirishima entered the room with his head in his hands. As Kirishima noticed that everyone was staring at him, she asked, "What did I miss?" "What?" Apartment Building 78, University of Arizona. In the fourth and final segment, Yui and Kana were the villains, and Mina and Raiko were the heroes in a hostage scenario. The primary objective of the villain team was to keep the hostage inside the structure until the allotted time had passed. At first, they were not permitted to actively kill the hostage, but they were permitted to do so if the heroes were seen carrying it. To win or defeat both villains, the heroes' primary objective was to simply free the hostage. As they waited outside the building, Mina said, "So, we got this right?" Raiko, feeling a little uncomfortable with Mina's apparent excitement, said, "Maybe. Don't really know how well they can fight." With obvious optimism about their chances, Mina remarked, "Well, it's not like they can't do anything too crazy. It's our first day after all. So, we should go sneaky, right?" Mina reacted angrily to his rather direct and graphic response. "Considering they can blow the hostages' brains out if they see us, then yes." "What? It's true. Worst case scenario, if they don't think they're gonna get away, they'll take down anyone with them." A bit dark, but true. Not like they're not expecting us. Mina was grumbling. It's not as though any rational criminal would act in this manner without considering the actions taken from. Raiko turned to the security bot on their left and asked abruptly, "Right. Say, how good are you at talking?" With a microphone in hand, the bot said, "I am well versed in the wall of lingo as you kids call it." "Good, you'll be doing that to keep them distracted. The building only has a few exits that they can exploit if they wanted to make a run for it, which with their quirks they shouldn't be able to do. Though given Tsutsumi's quirk, they should be left behind cover and within some of the buildings so that they don't risk being taken out." Raiko gave the bot the order. Mina smiled broadly at him as it followed it without question. "What?" Mina questioned. "Wow, look at you taking charge like that. Do you look up these types of things a lot?" But was met with a roll of the eyes. Raiko replied, "Please, I just play a lot of strategy games." He then produced one of his knives and set it behind a car. "We get in, we locate the target and I teleport us out. No way we can do that without a fight though, so can you handle yourself?" "Don't worry. I got your back," Mina exclaimed. While giving a thumbs up, he gave her a drop of perspiration before nodding his head in agreement. Then All Might raised his voice. "Okay. The final test starts now." Raiko walked to the back with Mina at his heels and gave the order, "Looks like we're up." Straight to the back door. A loud shot was heard, and they could hear the negotiator trying to speak. They were warning shots for the time being, based on the fact that it was still talking. "Mind melting this open?" Mina just smiled, then took the door handle and melted it. They hurried inside, and she opened it with a gentle push. Now that the gunfire had ceased, the negotiator appeared to be attempting to draw their attention. "They may already be aware of our presence. You must go more quickly." The sound of one of the guard bots around the corner had caused them to halt. Raiko pushed Mina back, waited for the perfect moment, then swiftly grabbed the bot and slammed it against the wall, forcing it to drop its homemade weapon. When it attempted to move, an elbow strong enough to hold it in place pinned it to the wall. Raiko growled, giving Mina the impression that he had teeth. "Hostage, now." Calmly, the machine said, "Third floor, cafeteria area with 2 more guards." He then hit the bot hard enough to deactivate him after saying, "Thank you." Mina saw the machine's limp, sparking form and said, "Wasn't that a little much?" Raiko, who had already started to head for the stairwell, said, "No, let's get moving." Despite her uncertainty, Mina followed him because she wanted to contribute. There was no opposition as they made their way directly to the room. When they arrived, they walked to either side of the door and looked inside. The 2 other guards were waiting in front of the hostage. The worrying part was when they said, "How about we rush in together? Haven't really spotted them just yet." But he held up his hand, counted down, and nodded his head. When he finished, they both hurried in simultaneously, drawing the guards' attention. Raiko threw out 2 knives with a swift motion, making the guards drop their weapons. Mina quickly punched one to the ground after sliding forward with her acid. After attempting to attack her, the other T was promptly kicked in the back of the head. With a scoff, he raised his leg back up as it crashed into the ground and broke apart. Mina hurriedly started to untie the hostage, and he became alert. "Oh, thank you dearly for the save. You are my heroes this day forth." Raiko said clumsily, "Yeah, you're welcome." Then she grabbed its shoulder and Mina's. Okay, time to move out, huh? Raiko ignored Mina when she joked, having performance issues? Since Kana was the only person he could think of who could make that shot, he asked, Son of A, did they destroy my mark? I should have left more. Just as Mina opened her mouth to speak, something rolled into the room. A blinding flash went off, and Raiko acted swiftly, grabbing her and the hostage before jumping over the table with them. When it calmed down, the sound of footsteps coming into the room was followed by Kana's voice. He glanced over and saw Yui and Kana in the doorway, saying, Don't bother. This is the only exit here. While Yui appeared to be holding batons rather than eskrima sticks, Kana had her sniper arm ready. Surrendering now or else your defeat will be painful. Mina muttered, Dramatic much? Before catching sight of the trembling droid. Hey, it's all right. We'll get out of this mess. Raiko snarled as the hostage, which was trembling, calmed down and could only nod. Since he was unable to throw anything, Kana would probably shoot it, eliminating his ability to teleport. Rushing probably wouldn't help, at least not without seriously hurting Mina or himself. Kana would probably still be able to shoot through the table behind them. Raiko tapped Mina's shoulder in the table, thinking, All right, time for some action. Get ready, we're heading down. Down, wait, what? Raiko lifted his foot and slammed it down on the floor before she could finish. The villain team was caught off guard when it collapsed into the lower floor. Oh, okay. As they leapt to the ground, Kana moved quickly and shot straight through the table, missing it. Yui ran to the hole and was able to jump down first, with Kana right behind her. But Raiko appeared directly behind her, snagging her arm and keeping her steady. Do me a favor and give up now before I... She threw her head back and slapped his nose before he could finish. Kana continued to yell, Ow! Son of A! And swiftly grabbed his arm before tossing him over her shoulder. If it weren't for the knife he threw at it, she would have shot him with her rifle arm raised. She missed her shot due to the impact, and he landed back on his feet with a disapproving expression. Well, you certainly got some skill. As she took his knife, Kana surprisingly returned her arm to normal and said, Same to you. He had tapped his foot on the floor and lifted his own eyes, narrowing them. After a few seconds of glaring at one another, they abruptly lunged at one another with their blades raised. When the blades clashed for the first time, orange sparks came to life, followed by several more. Though he took great pride in his sister's teachings, Raiko was by no means a master. But since she was mimicking every move he made and vice versa, Kana appeared to be learning from her own mistakes. The fact that she appeared much stronger than she actually was didn't help either. They were trying to exhaust the other by lunging, slashing, and jabbing. It was almost flawless how they matched themselves, even as they tried to move around the room, hurrying around objects and jumping over one another for an advantage. Raiko believed that the teachers should have been concerned because they were attempting to cut each other to pieces. Kana moved to avoid him as she tore out another knife for herself to use with her free hand on his coat. Raiko cursed to himself, and as soon as Kana started attacking, he was on the defensive. As he retreated and blocked, he was pushed violently in the direction of the wall. He kicked a piece of the table back up at her after stepping back over it, which was unfortunate for her. She only retreated a few feet after it slammed into her, but it was more than enough for him to hurl his own knife at her. Raiko appeared next to her, clutching her arm, after she swung it away in a quick reaction. Instead, he teleported to the one she was clutching. She missed him spinning them around before he swung his leg straight into her back when she swung her free arm at him. She lost the knives as the force knocked her off the ground. But she rolled off the ground, leapt back up, and fired without hesitation, her sniper arm ready. In reality, the impact hit his chest, but instead of penetrating him as one might expect, it threw him off his feet and into the hole below. As she ran to the hole to load another bullet, a flash went off. But instead of going down, she walked straight back out the door, her expression resolute. By carrying the light hostage over her shoulder, Mina had been able to stay ahead of Yui thanks to her acid. She had just left the door when Raiko showed up beside her. Hey there, where have you been? They hurried out of the alley and headed for the police cars, saying, Getting shot, now let's go. From there, it should have been over, but as the hostage fell forward with a smoking hole in the back of its head, a loud shot was fired. Raiko and Mina arrived just in time to see Kana outside the window when they looked up. It's over. The hostage has been taken out. Villain team wins. Mina exclaimed in frustration, Gah. Seriously. As Yui emerged from the alley wearing a disheartened expression. After all, she had wanted to do a bit more. Raiko couldn't even be upset. He ought to have known better. Fucking. Blah. But he was still annoyed, particularly because losing was so easy. I guess I'll be more aware the next time. Kana was looking down at them in the meantime, her face unreadable as she swiftly pulled her arm back. She hesitated for a moment before hearing All Might's voice reminding them to move aside. Unnoticed by anyone, she sighed deeply and walked back, shaking her hand slightly. Training Ground Zero, UA University, later. With his typical smile, All Might exclaimed, "Congratulations everyone on your first hero course class. I have to say that this was a successful first course." Naturally, he was aware of the conflicting reactions, which ranged from pride to disappointment, and he had addressed them promptly. However, this is merely the first day. There's more to come after this, and the outcome will be dramatically different with each class we have together. Embarrassed by how easily he lost, Kamakiri thought, no shit it will be. I detested the fact that it essentially had nothing to do with him, even if he had won. Since Kyoka and Monoma were the cause of his defeat, he glared at them both. Feeling depressed over her loss, Uraraka questioned, but shouldn't we be better than this? It's UA after all. All Might assured firmly, his smile widening, now, none of that. You have earned your place here, all of you have. It's our job as your teachers to ensure that you all grow into fine heroes. We are not expecting perfection. You are hero students after all. For now, it's your job to learn from us in order to become true heroes someday. And I can say confidently that each and every one of you have the makings of greatness to achieve that. All right. Uraraka exclaimed, brightening and flashing her own smile. We won't let you down, All Might. With a shark-like grin, Kirishima exclaimed, hell yeah, I'm not going down next time. Eager to continue, Iida asserted, we'll ensure to keep ourselves up to the task, sir. All Might appeared shy around them all, but others had offered similar praise. Izuku laughed and thought, leave to All Might to give a rousing speech and still feel embarrassed by it. Before coughing and getting straight, All Might said, I'm just saying it as it is. Anyway, I say you all have done well. An email review of your performance will be sent, detailing your strengths and areas for improvement. However, I declare that our first session is now over. It will only get more intense from now on, so be prepared, and never forget to go above and beyond. Plus Ultra. Raiko rolled her eyes. Because he interrupted All Might's pout, he received some sour looks. After saying, I wanted to say it. Class dismissed. He bounded out of the room, leaving everyone stunned. Before realizing the looks directed at him, Raiko rolled his eyes at it. Izuku could only sigh on behalf of his friend. What? He appeared to have forgotten how much everyone, including their classmates, adored All Might. Shortly after, they were all heading back to the locker rooms to put on their uniforms again. I really hope he adapts soon. Uraraka noticed Izuku writing again in his notebook as they were strolling and conversing. Even after his own test, he began writing in it right away. He was writing in there since the test started. In the end, her curiosity had prevailed. Hey, Midoriya. He turned from the book to her and asked, What were you writing in there? Oh, just everyone's quirks. Was the sound that almost all of them made together. Those people were annoying for the sake of being annoying, but he was used to people freaking out over it. Izuku said, laughing lightly, it's a hobby of mine. I study quirks, how people use them and how they can improve upon them. That's not too much of a problem, is it? His eye twitched as Suyu stated bluntly, it can come off a little suspicious. Considering that there was still a chance of a spy, it was reasonable. Even though it wasn't required, Momo comforted him, saying, but it isn't that strange, just unexpected. However, Kamakiri let out a loud, audible snort. Kamakiri, obviously irritated, asserted, TCH, there ain't nothing to improve on when it comes to me. Raiko added, drawing a glare from his fellow student, I don't know, last I checked Iida was the one who won the match. Not the guy who got caught in a trap before getting one tapped. That was a fluke and a cheap trick. Ain't like I got my hostage killed because he got scared of a little fight. Kamakiri snapped back. Thought I had more time. At least I can say I'm a dependable teammate. Can't say the same about you. You wanna get sliced up? I fought a living grenade and survived. I think I can handle you, butterknives. Izuku thought, this feels familiar, and then he coughed to get their attention. Can we save the fighting for later? I doubt either of you want to risk serving a punishment for Aizawa. That made them both a little stiff, and then they turned to give each other a final glare before laughing at each other. Ignoring them, Mina exclaimed abruptly, her face displaying a determined expression. Can we see those notes? I want to know what you got on me. Izuku smiled softly and hummed, well, yeah. I was going to share them with everyone. Plus I have a few, not questions on everyone's quirks. Even though he had been keeping notes on their quirks for years, some of the information might still be current. The goal here is to help everyone out after all. Mina exclaimed, "Really? Yes," and went on to speak with a few students. Not that none of them needed the additional assistance. Suyu asked, "Isn't that a little much, Midoriya?" Despite her curiosity, Momo didn't think it was ideal for her classmate to worry about other people. Yes, even as a hobby, you shouldn't need to burden yourself with helping us. But Izuku's only answer was a laugh. As they made their way to the locker rooms, Izuku smiled and said, "Please, we're going to be together for the next 3 years. It's only fair I do my part to ensure we do well to become the best we can be. At least, that's what I think." Monoma put an arm around Izuku and grinned smugly, saying, "Well, I for one agree with Midoriya. After all, we should make sure to keep ourselves at the top compared to our sister class." With a drop of perspiration, Izuku thought, not the words I'd use. He was only mildly uncomfortable with Monoma's kindness. He wasn't entirely incorrect, though. "I also wouldn't mind actually training with any of you either. It'll be fun to do." The formerly quiet voice of Shoto said, "You wouldn't be able to handle what I can." He pushed past, and they turned to see his unimpressed expression. Monoma said, "Oh come now, we're all classmates after all, it's only logical for us," as she got ready to follow suit. Then, without much concern, his hand was pushed away. "Wah." Shoto glared at him and said, "If you want to waste time being friends, then feel free. I'm only here for one goal and I refuse to waste it acting friendly." It was enough to cause Monoma to back off, but Izuku just stood there. "Is dismissing us really the best move?" Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're gonna be with us for 3 years." Shoto went into the locker rooms and left them outside, saying, "I don't need to know any of you. No matter what any of you can do, it won't be enough to keep up with me." Unable to control his glare, Kirishima uttered, "Talk about tense." Recalling her match, Uraraka muttered, "I mean, he is crazy strong." "Doesn't mean he has to be a jerk about it," exclaimed Toru, as she was obviously irritated with her ex-partner. "Trying to get him to open up is going to be difficult, isn't it?" Izuku asked himself in his head. He could have been a little more tactful, but he was aware that the boy had problems. "I'm sure he'll come around eventually. Best we clear out though before Aizawa says something." To put it mildly, that got them moving. Izuku's dorm room, UA University, 1A dorm rooms, later. Izuku cheerfully dropped his bag and left his tie on the stand as he entered his room. Thankfully, the remainder of the day proceeded without incident. There was no doubt that his class was good. Everything was a little more developed than he had anticipated, though some things might have needed improvement. Shoto, Kamakiri. Kana. As Izuku took off his shirt, he thought, and I still need to know if the love is still happening or not. With a heavy sigh, he placed his hands on his knees. I'm getting too old for this crap, at least spiritually. I wish there was someone I could discuss this with. Izuku sneered and got up, grabbing a new outfit. Okay, be stubborn. One for all would be his next attempt. He insisted on taking a shower first, but before he did, he picked up his phone after seeing it go off. Whatever annoyance he had harbored vanished when he saw the message, and a smile spread across his face. Heyo. Guess WHO got through their first day. This girl, and I'm taking this class by storm. Even if it is a little empty, but the teacher's nice. Wish we had him back at that crap school before. Hope you had a good hero course. Keep updated on all of your new friends. I'll do the same. He was grinning as he typed. I'll keep you informed on my friends and on Uraraka as well, winking face. He laughed at the quick responses and denials that appeared all at once. Class 1A classroom, UA University, 2 weeks later. Considering how quickly this world has evolved in comparison to the original, it was actually unsettling. After 2 weeks, there was only talk of the superhero school and nothing about the USJ. It nearly caused him to lower his defenses, but he was unable to do so. He had a feeling of unease that urged him to be ready. He would be prepared, whether that was due to prior knowledge or his imagination. Izuku turned his head to look at the other students in the class and thought, but at least things have been going well here. Apart from the obvious exceptions, they were contentedly conversing with one another as they waited for Aizawa to arrive. They got along well with everyone, which was good. If only Katsuki could follow suit now. Katsuki simply declared that he would make the class as great as he was, even though he was still more than irritated about being in 1B. Unfortunately, he's trying to rush it and they haven't yet gotten used to his attitude. Fortunately, he had not yet blown someone up despite his friend's constant complaints about the situation. He was only grateful for Katsuki's habit of going to bed at precisely 8 o'clock, as he would have been stuck putting up with him all night. His class was doing better, so he ignored that. Although they shared some of their other classes, they really only took hero course together. And if they didn't get together for lunch, they really spent the most time in the dorms. Even though they had only involved trivial activities like watching TV or playing games, he believed that relationships of that nature were significant. Boo! He flinched as Dark Shadow suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Ha! Got ya! Tokiyami screamed, "Calm yourself, Dark Shadow," but was met with laughter. "Ah! Forgive me, Midoriya. Controlling my darkness has always been difficult." Izuku patted Dark Shadow's hand and laughed, "It's fine." In fact, that had taken it by surprise, causing it to recoil and turn to face him. "Oh, sorry, didn't like that." Dark Shadow muttered, "And no, not used to that from other people," as Tokiyami grinned at the expression. Dark Shadow became enraged when Tokiyami laughed and said, "It's rare to see you get flustered so easily." Dark Shadow whimpered, "Hey, I am not flustered," and they both laughed. "Grr, don't make me talk about your younger years as an edgelord." Tokiyami immediately stopped talking. It still seems odd to watch Dark Shadow speak so much. Even assignments were given to them by Aizawa. Did Dark Shadow speak in the canon? He couldn't remember. At that point, Aizawa made the decision to enter the classroom, which instantly caused everyone to sit up straight and concentrate. With a rare compliment, Aizawa said, "A bit faster. Good, you're adjusting well." Izuku was still attempting to identify the person who had bagged him and caused him to relax. "However, I want to keep this brief. At the end of this hour, you have to pick out a class representative and a vice representative." Out loud, Raiko asked, Why? Isn't that a high school thing?" When Aizawa heard Nezu laughing over the intercom, he rolled his eyes and explained, "A request made by our glorious headmaster here." A loud and audible gulp could be heard throughout the thread as he began to pack his bag. "Anyway, you're required to do it and I don't want to hear any excuses. If there are any, I'll triple your assignments. If you have any questions, ask them now." Iida held up the highest hand and said, "What are the responsibilities of a class representative and the vice representative when it comes to our class, sir?" "You'll be representing your class, along with the faculty as a whole. You will be responsible for informing your classmates of any school activities along with any planned trips that you'll be told in advance. You will also be responsible for making sure that any request done by your classmates goes through by myself or another faculty member. Especially if it's to head off school grounds. Beyond that, you'll be responsible for making sure your class stays on top of itself. The vice, however? Effectively the same thing, only acting to help out." Aizawa concluded by zipping himself inside his cocoon and saying, "Now, hurry up and decide." Everyone began talking as soon as that occurred. Mina pointed to herself and exclaimed, Oh, pick me. "You should be voting for me," Toru yelled, enthusiastically fluttering her arms. Kirishima boasted, "I would be a manly representative," the woman said. "Why are they eager about this?" Raiko wrote. Momo muttered to herself, "It does sound a little exciting. I certainly wouldn't mind." She didn't notice Raiko's ear twitch. Raiko thought, well, you'd actually be good with things like that. In his opinion, she was the best student in the class, surpassing Izuku in some subjects. Iida called out, "Everyone please calm down," as he slammed his hand down on the table. "We must decide in a dignified manner. Only those who actually wish to handle the responsibility, not out of some childish desire." He blushed in shame as Sue pointed out, "Your hands raised the highest." Iida defended himself by saying, "Well, I am interested obviously." In order to remind them of their current predicament, Sue continued, "And how are we supposed to decide? We barely know each other." They only had 2 weeks, which was insufficient time to determine who would be the best. Iida reiterated, leaving many to question whether they truly wanted it. Therefore, only those who are interested should be the ones voted for. Nor should anyone be allowed to vote for themselves. One Izuku Midoriya in particular. Should I pursue it? It's definitely not that important. To be honest, he would be lying if he claimed that it was ever truly significant, aside from providing other characters with a title to work with. However, that had at least some benefits. As a representative, perhaps I can provide them with an additional push, but I'm already working on helping everyone with their quirks. Screw it, meh. Izuku immediately caught their attention when he said out loud, "In that case, I don't mind running." Not wanting to be left behind, Momo added, "I too would like to take part." "Ha ha. Don't count me out either," exclaimed Monoma, with his trademark crazed laughter. After some consideration, none of the other students in the class seemed interested. I have no doubt that we will remain on top of the other classes with me in charge. The others appeared to be a more sensible choice all of a sudden. At that point, the bell rang, causing everyone to freeze as Aizawa got out of his bag. He had a disappointed red glow in his eyes. It looks like I'm adding extra assignments for everyone. With a calm expression, Izuku said, "Sorry sir, but we can't rush such an important choice. It would be illogical to do so without much thought." To continue, Aizawa leaned up a little and said, "You won't always have time to make decisions like that. Least of all when you become heroes and have lives on the line. You need to think quickly if you wish to be ready." Izuku's eyes never left Aizawa as he replied, "We also should not act hastily with our actions. One mistake, one choice, can easily shift how everything goes." After a few moments of staring at one another, Aizawa eventually rolled his eyes. They all shuddered when Aizawa said, "Okay, you vote when you get back from lunch and decide then. Don't waste any more time or else it will be 5 times the assignments. Now, get out of here." They hurried off, leaving Aizawa to start lying down again, but he had noticed something Mike had sent him. Then he groaned in frustration and slowly got out of his bag. Damn reporters. Desk hall, University of Arizona, Himiko yelled, "Izu!" When she saw him. She joined Izuku, Raiko, Kyoka, Uraraka, and Iida at the table with her food in hand. She sat beside him right away and gave him a hug. "Hi everyone. Ah, you must be the sister Midoriya spoke of. It is a pleasure to meet you. I am Iida Tenya." "Good to meet you Mr. Roboto." Iida yelled at Izuku, his hand chopping and his body rigid. "Midoriya, how have you been describing me to others?" As everyone laughed at his movements, Izuku thought, "Gosh, I wish I could call him Buzz Lightyear." They all started talking after they had all calmed down. Iida started the conversation by saying, "I must admit, Midoriya, I was surprised to hear that you wanted to run for class representative. Forgive me for saying this, but you don't seem to be the type to go for a role like that. I normally wouldn't, but I felt the need to keep my promise. To help everyone become great heroes while we're in the same class. The position would push me to do that more so than usual. Additionally, training would be aided by having some influence in the class. In addition to any private issues that might arise. But if I don't get it, it's between you and Yaoyorozu." Iida said, Thank you in advance. I have decided to give my vote to you as well." Raiko said sarcastically, "Well you ain't getting mine." Izuku turned to face him in shock. "Dude, you do way too much already, even before coming here. You're gonna burn yourself out adding on anything extra like this." Izuku said, "Wah no I don't." Kyoka gave him a playful smile in response. Green merely pouted when Kyoka laughed and said, "Right, sure you don't, Green. But he does have a point, between everything going on here, you think you can handle all of that?" Her face suddenly flushed as she said, "If I can't then I'll have you to pick me up. All of you, of course." Raiko gave her a knowing glance and replied, "Of course." He received a death glare in return, but he chose to ignore it and keep his carrot. "But I'll be giving my vote to Yaoyorozu. She seems like a good fit. And isn't a robot." "I am not a robot." Iida hung his head in defeat, earning another round of laughter. Uraraka turned to her and said, "Hey, Himiko." Her smile made the blonde jump a little. "How are your classes going? Midoriya mentioned you're going to become a lawyer." Himiko stared at him, and he smiled back. "He did he?" she asked. "They're going well. A lot more boring than those hero classes you guys have, but I like the peacefulness. At the same time, the assignments are such a pain." Uraraka, who didn't think she could handle it, remarked, "I can imagine. Still, it's very impressive that you're going for it. I know some people say hero classes are challenging, but I doubt I would be able to handle any kind of law class." With a fanged smile, Himiko asserted, "You never know. I think anyone is capable of anything so long as they work for it." Fortunately, Uraraka no longer had that weird sensation in her chest, making conversation easier. Izuku, restraining himself from making fun of his sister for the moment, grinned at the exchange. Despite their professional paths, it was good that he could still have moments like this. Iida was trying to win over both Kyoka and Raiko to her cause, while Himiko and Uraraka were still chatting away. While Kyoka was playing some of her new songs and he was writing in his notebook again, the latter had his ear twitching while he tried to play his game. After a quick glance up, he saw Katsuki and was ready to wave him over when he was startled by a loud alarm. Oh fuck, everyone, including himself, had woken up in a panic and was scanning the area as people started to disperse. They soon found themselves dragged alongside the terrified throng. The alarm of the intruder. maybe the jerk is still alive. It's all for one. But he would have to worry about that later, and he might have Tenko as well. He had every intention of heading for the exit as he pushed himself to stand up straight. Perhaps in an attempt to apprehend the elusive traitor they appeared to possess. But that changed right away when he witnessed some individuals, including some of his classmates, being pushed over. Son of Uraraka. Why yeah. She managed to hear over the commotion. Float me, now, she said, grasping the situation and giving him a quick backslap. He lunged in the air, his eyes flicking momentarily to the window as one for all cackled around him. As Aizawa and Mike struggled to get the news crews and media to come in, he could see them rushing in. Despite not having a microphone, he spoke by focusing it around his throat and increasing his percentage. Enough. The crowd was frozen in stunned silence by the loud voice. They looked up at him and quickly noted the uniform before concluding that, despite his angry expression, he was a villain. When they finally saw them, they let out a loud sigh of relief. Now that I have your attention, if you look outside you'll see that it's nothing more than reporters, who are being handled by our teachers. Although it didn't last long, Izuku continued after hearing it. It however does not excuse how many of you acted during this. How many people were knocked over and stepped over because you were rushing for an exit? There's a reason why we are taught to handle these situations in a calm and orderly manner. The smallest thing goes wrong, and they freak out. They were supposed to act like adults, and they were on the verge of becoming so. He made no effort to conceal his own dissatisfaction, and it was also evident. Hey, we're not training to be heroes, ya know. Oh man, there's no way the teachers aren't gonna know about this. We're still new here. He was already being lowered to the ground while many of them attempted to offer excuses. As his classmates gathered around him, he shot Uraraka a grateful glance. His thoughts drifted outside as they thanked him for actually putting an end to the chaos. He was aware of his presence. In addition to Shigaraki, there was now a possible traitor in the crowd. He detested his life on some days. Class 1A classroom, UA University. Aizawa came in and asked, so, have you made your decision yet? The news reporter's invasion of the grounds and the destruction of their security gate must have contributed to his slack scowl. With a pile of papers in hand, Iida declared, we finished just now. Our representative will be Izuku Midoriya while our vice will be Momo Yaoyorozu. When they clapped for the two people, Aizawa looked at them wearily. Congratulations, don't screw it up. He immediately crawled back into his sleeping bag, leaving them to converse among themselves while everyone watched. With her fist up in the air, Mina exclaimed, 3 cheers to the reps of our class. The majority of the class had done so, which must have greatly irritated Aizawa, who was trying to block out the noise. Momo said brightly, thank you everyone. Her innocent voice made their hearts skip a beat. Not overly shocked, Izuku said, thanks for the votes everyone. His position was essentially assured by his brief lunch performance. But Momo was not far behind, securing her position as vice, at least, with ease. I'll try my best to ensure we become great heroes, beyond UA's expectations. We'll reach over the top before you know it. As intended, brief but sweet. Merely enough to make everyone grin and smile broadly. Everyone had ideas, and they immediately began to share them with Momo and with him. He did the same, albeit much more slowly, while she was already taking notes on such things. Why? Because Aizawa looked irritated at his phone during that brief moment before getting back up. Listen up everyone, tomorrow we have been assigned a joint trip with 1B to a faculty to continue your training. Be prepared because we'll be testing to see the kind of heroes you can and will be there. So, it was actually just getting started? Bring it. The next day, UA University, bus. Well, if it isn't our lesser sister class, 1B. Monoma exclaimed, his typical insane expression unmistakable. They gave him a startled, deadpan, and naturally irate look. But he didn't care, his smug smile spreading wide. Here to learn from the better class that were simply superior. Sue gave him a tongue slap, which sent him flying to the ground. Sue retracted her tongue and said, don't mind him, he's a little loopy in the head. Sorry. Although some remained irritated with him, they did not hold the class accountable. He did, however, diminish their perception of the class. Izuku actually took notes on every student in Katsuki's class during that time. Kendo Asuka. Tokage Setsuna. Tetsu, in other words. Kaminari Denki. Shiozaki Ibara. Yanagi Reiko. Tsunotori, the pony. Ojiro Mashirao. Rin Harayu. Shishida Jiroda. Kaibara Senator Shiro Honta. Shoji Mezzo. Awase Yosetsu. Finally, we have Kanoko Komori. Fortunately, They all appeared to be the same as before. He was also irritated by the dearth of support equipment, which they ought to be considering. A hand grabbed his shoulder as he slowly lifted his hand to take out a notebook. Though he smirked as he said it, Katsuki growled, "Save it for later, you nerd." Even though his attire was essentially the same, he was grateful to have switched out those enormous grenades for shotgun gauntlets. For a man who enjoyed hitting and blasting, this was the ideal option. "I can't wait to kick your ass at whatever we're doing." When Katsuki snorted, Izuku laughed and said, "You do need to catch up, don't you?" "You wish, Deku." With Setsuna at her heels, Itsuka approached them and extended her hand, asking, "Midoriya, right? I'm Itsuka Kendo, the representative of 1B. Setsuna here is my vice. It's nice to meet you." Izuku shook her hand and said, "Same to you. My vice would be Yayorozu behind me, and thank you for watching over Kachan here." "Wait. You call him Kachan?" Setsuna said, grinning mischievously. Katsuki gave him a death glare as snickers rang out from both classes. "Well, nothing new." Izuku smiled broadly and ignored it, not missing a hand signal that he was by now quite familiar with. "Yes, I called him that a lot." As they released their hands, Itsuka remarked, "Well, ignoring that, I hope our classes can get along. Even if we are technically rivals." With a quick glance at the recuperating Monoma, Izuku asserted, "Don't worry, I'm sure we'll be fine. Even if I have to rein in some of my own classmates." Vlad King had approached them at that precise moment, with Aizawa standing directly behind him, glaring wearily. Vlad grinned broadly and said, "Okay classes, we're leaving now." Aizawa just looked at his class to get going. Before they could risk his wrath, everyone hastily fled to the buses. As soon as everyone boarded the bus, Iida urged them to sit in a neat manner. Iida actually paused when he realized he was the only one standing, saying, "Easy there, Iida, everyone's already seated." He took a seat close to his friends, head down, just as Aizawa took a seat. Looking back, the civil bot in the driver's seat appeared to be grinning. The bus departed shortly after, saying, "Good morning everyone, fasten your seatbelts, don't be too loud, and enjoy the ride, please." They were headed to their destination. Along the way, everyone discussed their goals and their first experience working together with 1B. But Izuku's thoughts were elsewhere. "I detest this. Hate it all." He genuinely wished he could adopt the vigilante lifestyle during these moments. He could have warned the heroes of what was about to happen at least then. He was not, so any warning from him would only lead to his investigation and suspicion for various reasons. Today, the League was going to launch an offensive, they never did. They were increasing their numbers, and 1B was joining them. He didn't think any of them would be taken seriously by Shigaraki. The presence of the Nomu still worried him to no end. If any of them survived, it was due to a combination of plot and luck. What if, however, they were not protected in this way? What if there were some skilled thieves there, after all? Could it be that Shigekari was merely attempting to create a murder scene? What if he succeeded in reducing one of them to dust? "Midoriya." "Huh?" Sue was staring at him when he snapped out of his reverie. "Sorry, I was lost in my thoughts. Something wrong?" Yes, he did begin to use his one for all more during training. "No, just curious about your quirk. It's a lot like All Might's. There are a lot of strength-like quirks out there, though yours is the closest to what I can compare to his." "Well, I doubt that much. I really couldn't use mine for the longest time." Izuku was easy to deceive. Only Kyoka, who had long since discovered the truth, could possibly know if he was or not. With Kirishima and herself emerging from the seat behind them, Mina questioned, "Really? Was it difficult to use or something?" "Something like that. My quirk is a bit of a stockpiler, so it took time for it to actually come through." Kirishima said, "Oh, like a few months or a year?" After giving it some thought, Izuku nodded and said, "Try. About over a month ago, almost 2 months actually." "Wait, what?" Kirishima started, but Mina's shout caught the bus's attention. "You didn't get to use your quirk until a month ago." "Yeah, pretty much," Izuku replied, conscious of the wide looks he was getting. "My body pretty much rejected it for my entire life up until recently. It wasn't until recently that I could actually use it." "But for so many years?" Momo asked, obviously interested in the circumstances. "I've never heard of a quirk taking so long to come in." "With a backlash like mine, it's understandable." Izuku revealed the wounds from his initial one for all attempt by pulling up his sleeve. Even though some of the guys had seen it in the locker room, they still winced alongside the girls. "I broke my arm the first time I used it at full power. And that was after my training for UA." Iida trailed off, his face turning pale as the thought occurred to him. Wait, if you used it back when you were a child. They all gulped when Izuku said plainly, I would have gone pop. As her pale face was shared with the class, Mina exclaimed, oh no, I did not need that image in my head, Midoriya. They couldn't help but worry about how casually he mentioned blowing up. Sorry, my bad. Sue attracted his attention by saying, well, that does explain a few things about you at least. Between how you work out, how you analyze quirks and how much support gear you have, you must have been planning to go into heroics without a quirk at all. Izuku laughed and said, that was the plan. Then I punched an ocean. Kirishima asked, receiving a nod, so you were just gonna enter the exam with no quirk at all in mind? Just your hands? Manly? Toru questioned, still, do you even need any of that gear then? They had all witnessed the full extent of his quirk's capabilities. Izuku said, glancing down at his helmet for a moment, of course I do. I can't even half the power my quirk has yet, and I've put a lot of thought into all of these, you know. Besides, I would rather not just rely on my quirk to get by. That just sounds illogical. Aizawa shifted in his position but did not raise his voice. Toru said, without giving her own equipment much thought, that makes a lot of sense. Nothing could possibly work in line with her, she was sure of it. At least she wondered. I wonder if his notebooks contain any ideas. As they traveled, the conversations shifted to support gear for a short time. Along the way, Izuku probably checked his own equipment several times to make sure he had everything he needed for the impending battle. Then he closed his eyes for a moment. Hey, are you guys feeling talkative yet? Izuku sighed and opened his eyes to see the USJ in sight. Figures. All right, let's play. Main Center, USJ. It was a large building. He overheard Raiko murmuring about hero school budgets, which was not surprising considering it was UA to some extent. He couldn't hold him responsible. Heroics received a lot of funding, most likely more than was necessary. However, the results were undeniable, particularly in the case of UA graduates such as All Might. He wasn't here, by the way. Like an adrenaline jockey, he was probably running around eliminating villains. Somehow, he knew to blame fate for this one, even though he wished he was here. But they still had Vlad King, Eraserhead, and now 13. Hello students. I am 13. The pro hero said as she made her introduction, greeting each student with a cheerful demeanor. I'm glad to see so many of you excited about today. I welcome you all to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, otherwise known as a USJ. I can't believe it's really her, Uraraka exclaimed, in an attempt to control her expression. After receiving a blush of embarrassment, Sue said, you're a big fan, aren't you, Uraraka? Uraraka asserted, well, she is my favorite, by a long mile. After feeling something in her hand, she discovered a tiny notebook with a tiny frog on it. Sue smiled and said to her, wait until the lesson is over before you get an autograph for yourself. Uraraka grinned broadly, looking very cute. Kiro, you're cute. Aizawa approached Vlad and said, where's All Might? As Aizawa moaned, Vlad turned away from his phone and replied, saving the day as usual. Looks like there's a bit of a wave of crime going around and he's been spotted all over Japan. Aizawa complained, not entirely pleased. If that idiot is going to be a teacher, then he needs to work on actually committing to it. Vlad looked back at Katsuki and remarked, well, we can continue our lesson without him. Don't think my kids can wait much longer. Like many of them, the boy appeared prepared for action, but he was already scanning his surroundings with a feral expression. 13 said, no issues with that, before turning back to the young adults. Now, today we'll be testing your control over your quirks within certain danger scenarios. This includes natural disasters and villain attacks. Raiko tried to remain silent as he muttered, control our quirks? We had them since we were 4. But he realized when Izuku coughed and then stared at him. Oh, right. With a finger up as it opened, 13 asserted, I know many of you believe you know your quirk, but knowing how much you regulate them is very important. My own quirk, Black Hole, is quite powerful and versatile within rescue situations. The black holes suck in and disintegrate any matter at the atomic level, which makes it perfect for removing wreckage. It can also do the same to a human body, no doubt. 13 asserted this, her voice much more solemn than the students had anticipated. Still, she went on. While you may have seen many of those who use our quirks for heroics, you have seen the same thing of those who use their quirks to cause damage. Either on purpose or as an accident, All Might is strong enough to permanently break the human body. Endeavor's flames are powerful enough to incinerate people down to ash. Even your teachers, such as Midnight, can permanently put people to sleep or worse, while Vlad's blood creation can be used to do far more damage than needed. 13 clarified, noting the expressions. Most appeared disturbed, while a few appeared unaffected, either already aware of her or ignoring her. This is why these exercises will be important. Control is a key part of being a hero, and knowing exactly how much of your power is actually necessary for the situation. It is also essential to know how your quirk can be used for rescue situations. By the end of the day, I hope you'll understand this and use what you learned to save lives. At this, Izuku couldn't help but nod. He knew that when it came to heroes, control was never a problem. However, villains made things challenging, particularly because of how uncontrollable they would eventually become. Speaking of them, a black fog began to form and he looked toward the center area. Aizawa. He followed Aizawa's gaze and froze after he raised an eye at him. Several figures emerged from the black, purplish fog, which grew in size. The most noticeable of these was a man who looked like the fog itself, with sharp yellow eyes, a very nice suit and tie, and a metal brace that ran from his collarbone to just below his eyes. As more mist-like portals sprang up all around him and more people entered, he raised his hands in greeting. Greetings, heroes. Introductions are to be made. I am Kurogiri and we. They carried weapons, their quirks openly displayed, their faces proud and haughty. Are the League of Villains. It is a pleasure to meet you all. Kaminari, more than perplexed, questioned, wait, is this part of the test? With explosions exploding in his hands, Katsuki snarled, no way, dunceface. This is the real deal. Mina glared at her phone and exclaimed, damn it, I can't get a connection, instead. Wait, me neither. With a hint of fear showing at the increasing numbers, Itsuka remarked, they must be cutting our connection somehow. Raiko pulled out a knife and said, seriously, what is up with the security around here? He jumped when he heard Kana say, Usagiyama. All she had to do was wait to see if they could actually engage in combat with her sniper arm ready. Did you leave a knife at the dorms? You should head there easily enough. Unfortunately not. He had never thought of doing it before, and he had never made it a habit to use it to get home. With a swift dismissal, Kana took aim and said, then we're on our own here. She was shocked when Aizawa actually stopped her, even though she was more than sure she could hit the man who was causing this. Sensei. Aizawa looked back down and was glaring. Everyone, you have to leave now. This is not a drill, he said. This is an actual threat and I won't have any of you get hurt if I can help it. 13, get them going. Me and Vlad will stall them. The heroine snapped, right away. Everyone follow me. Izuku saw another figure emerge from the fog as many of them began to make their way. He was slender and had silver grayish hair. He had on a long, dust black trench coat, dark blue pants, black shoes, and a long-sleeved black shirt. His hands were all over him. It was Tomaru Shigaraki. Oh, is All Might not here, Kurogiri? Shigaraki asked, tilting his head to gaze up at the students who were running away. With a lowered head, the mist villain replied, no, it seems that he is running late, Shigaraki. Forgive me for not ensuring that the target would follow his schedule. With a hand on his neck and a light scratch, Shigaraki remarked, that's disappointing, but hardly anything major. I wonder if we kill a few of those brats, he'll appear sooner. The hero arriving a little too late would do much better for when he meets his end. Oh well, make sure to allow the guests of our raid to all have fun. Soon enough we'll all be celebrating the death of Alham. He glanced up, past the lifeless fingers of the hand in his face, and saw that he and Izuku were staring at each other. He was clearly prepared to act, as evidenced by the glare on his face, but he was brought back to reality by a hand on his shoulder. Kirishima grabbed his classmate and exclaimed, Midoriya, we have to get going. Then, Izuku gave Shigaraki a final glance before entering his class, but he complied despite his growl. Oh, that one looked eager to fight. Make sure none of them escape, Kurogiri. Shigaraki gave the order. After giving a nod, the mist villain disappeared. Just as Vlad King and Eraserhead leapt to the ground. Oh, two prominent heroes are here. I must admit, I like Eraserhead a little more compared to you, Vlad. With blood pooling around his fists, Vlad remarked, hey, well, it's a shame that I can't say I care that much. How about we talk about it down at the police station? But as he was saying this, the other criminals had moved in front of their boss, each prepared to join them in throwing down. Yesh, how many of them have time to be part of this? Pulling his goggles over his eyes, Aizawa remarked, enough to actually think they're going to get away with it. He could tell by their appearance that they were nothing more than a group of incompetent criminals lacking any true skill or technique. Let's deal with them quickly. Vlad exclaimed, no complaints here. Let's show these punks why you shouldn't mess with our students, as they went up to the group of villains in front of them. 13 was in charge of both UA classes at the time, in the hopes of actually making it out to the front entrance. But when Kurogiri appeared between them and the exit path, that soon vanished. He hardly moved his head out of the way of the bullet that was aimed at his neck. Leaving so soon? Forgive me, but my master would not like that very much. Without hesitation, Kana fired again, but as Kurogiri reformed, the mist absorbed her shot. That was rude. With another non-lethal round prepared, Kana asserted, I don't want to hear that from a villain. However, Tetsu, Kirishima, and Kamakiri were among the others who chose to move quickly. 13 shouted, no, don't, but continued to be disregarded. Kamakiri slashed forward, shouting, time to go down you freak, as Kirishima and Tetsu threw their fists. Before reaching the classes, Kurogiri's mist swiftly grew and engulfed them. A few of them were actually able to avoid it, but the majority soon found themselves overpowered. As One for All flared around him, Izuku swore. After giving Kurogiri a quick glance and getting ready to attack, he saw that 13 was also about to be dragged in. He yanked her away without thinking, but not before the mist swelled up and engulfed him. Not to mention the additional criminals he had called upon with him, it was soon only a quarter of them left to face the villain before them. As the mist dissipated and he stayed in the middle, Kurogiri said, I would advise that you accept your fate. These games will be your last after all. Officially, the USJ had begun.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.